Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 15th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory, the Nanaimo First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. As the province is in Phase 3 of their opening plan, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, I will call those who have signed up to the podium to address Council. The E-Town Hall portion of tonight's meeting will commence following agenda item 8, presentations. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. And Ms. Gurry, we have a number.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The weather has affected some of our guests this evening. So the first item on late items is removal of agenda item 8A, Ms. Pat Miller, Executive Director, BC Chapter for Public Works Association of BC. She was here to present the Most Creative Entry Award for our Public Works section at the City of Nanaimo. So they have been removed from the agenda and will be attending at a later date. Agenda item 13B, Official Community Plan Amendment Application, number OCP 91, Sandstone Master Plan, adding presenters Georgia Desjardins, Senior Asset Manager, Seacliff Properties, and Tanisha Everst, Manager of Planning, Key Corp Consulting. My apologies if those names are incorrect. As well as adding delegations from Mr. William Yoakum, Councillor, Nanaimo First Nations, Dale Porter, and Mike Parker, Chase River Community Association. For agenda item 13C, School Site Acquisition Charges, the addition of the delegation Mark Walsh, Secretary Treasurer, School District number 68. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. A motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Martman, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. I'll just move on to the Mayor's report. I'll try not to be very long tonight as we do have the E-Town Hall. Last week, the city issued a press release entitled "It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Winter." And obviously the weekend has certainly proved that. We're advising residents to consider preparing for winter weather and storm conditions around your home. If there's heavy rain or melting snow, we're asking you to clear leaves and debris from catch basins or storm drains near your property. If you're going into our parks, which we all love, please be cautious. Trails, boardwalks, bridges, stairs, and playground equipment can become slippery and hazardous if there is rain, snow, or ice. On the roads, during a snowfall, the city's priority is to plow and maintain Priority 1 routes, which are emergency routes and all major roads. Residential areas are typically plowed and maintained within 96 hours unless snow and icy conditions return crews back to Priority 1 routes. I think it's important to note that during an extreme weather event, please stay informed by listening to your local radio stations, checking the city's website and social media for updates, and sign up for the city's emergency alert system at www.nanaimo.ca/go-to/alerts. Given that salt is only effective at melting ice down to -6 degrees Celsius, brine, liquid salt solution is used to prevent icing, as well as preventing snow and ice from bonding to road surfaces. Nanaimo's roads and traffic services are responsible for maintaining approximately 1,100 lane kilometers of paved streets. So try and keep that in mind when you're feeling a bit impatient because your street hasn't been plowed. Obviously, the city has undergone a pretty dramatic rainstorm. The estimate is that between 125 millimeters and 150 millimeters of rain, depending on where you were, fell in the last 3 days since the current storm started on Friday. Since the beginning of November, a total of almost 280 millimeters has fallen in Nanaimo. In response, the Nanaimo Public Works activated its Department Operations Center to be in a position to direct resources to priority areas quickly. We've had flooding in a number of areas. I think those of you who've been at home today or had an opportunity to see news or pick it up on your electronic devices have seen how devastating this has been for many people in British Columbia. And our sympathies go out to them because, touch wood, we have passed with relatively little damage in comparison to some areas of the province where the impact has been horrendous. I also want to note on a positive thing, the HMCS Nanaimo Bell has come back to City Hall for safekeeping as the ship is in for maintenance and refit. It is the tradition in this city that our ship, named for our city, in fact, has undergone, whenever it has undergone a refit or repairs, has had its bell returned to us for safekeeping. And in keeping with that tradition, a small ceremony was held at City Hall to do that. And finally, on a somber note, I just want to note for those of you who have been citizens here in Nanaimo for some time, the passing of former Councillor Bill King, an active citizen and Rotarian who served 2 terms on council, as I recall, who passed away in the last, just a couple of weeks ago. Bill King took his citizenship seriously, put his name forth for public service, and had that honor, as I say, for 2 terms. And the city wants to express to his widow and his family our condolences on behalf of all of us, out of respect for his work and his service. Ms. Gurry, we have nothing to rise and report on tonight. Unfortunately, due to the weather, and for those of you who've seen the condition of the Malahat, it's easily explained. We do not have a presentation that we're anticipating honoring the city, and it's now on to the E-Town Hall meeting. We will begin that portion of the meeting dedicated to an E-Town Hall focusing on the 2022 to 2026 draft financial plan. In accordance with past practice, there are various ways to reach us, and Ms. Farnez-Faroki, our communications manager, is going to be our master of ceremonies tonight. And mercifully, you won't have to hear from me for a little while unless it's to answer questions. So Ms. Faroki, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Good evening to everyone who is joining us online, watching us on Shaw Channel 4, Shaw Blue Sky Channel 105, and of course in the auditorium tonight. We welcome you and we look forward to spending some quality time together over the next possible hour. As the mayor mentioned, my name is Farnez-Faroki and I'm your MC tonight. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to quickly do some housekeeping that those of you who are watching online and here are quite familiar with, but we do have some really active residents who have been participating through our various engagement surveys that are new to engaging with the city. So please bear with me as I go through this for their benefit. As the mayor mentioned, there's a number of ways to connect with us tonight. One way is electronically. So those of you who know, if you go to our website, you are able to submit your questions that way. If you're on social media, particularly Twitter and Facebook, you can use the hashtag NanaiMoTH, as you can see on the screen. And on our Facebook, you'll see the link that we have on there that will take you to the event page where you can submit your questions, and someone is going to take your questions and send it to the moderators, and eventually, hopefully, I will get it. If there's duplicate questions, we will condense them just to be mindful of other people who will be having who may have different questions, and of course, due to time. The other way that you can connect with us is in person. And so as you may or may not be able to see, to my right and to my left, there are standing mics. So we just ask that you be mindful of the 6 feet apart and the COVID rules that we still have in play. And pretty much that sums it up. And if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to start off with one of our questions that we have received through the website. And that will be in terms of yearly tax and user rate increases, how will council balance the needs of a growing city with the financial limitations of residents and the burden that increased taxes puts on each family? No pressure.
I'm not seeing any of council jump forward, so I will give a brief answer. It is the usual to some extent, and I don't mean to diminish the responsibilities involved in dealing with the city's budget annually, but there are more asks than there is political willingness or desire on the part of residents to spend that kind of money. And so we will make the compromises that we have to, keeping in mind that the question's premise is quite correct. We are a growing city, basically 2% a year, which is a remarkable growth rate for a community of this size. But everyone has discovered us, and the real estate prices certainly seem to confirm that. We are not in any way settled on what tax increase there will be, but there will be a tax increase, and guaranteed in the sense that we implement a 1% tax every year with our asset management program. And the other tax increase will relate to both inflation and the needs of the city. The demands are great, and we will do our best. I'm not seeing anyone else from council jump up and wish to answer. Oh, Councillor Thorpe, please. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I will just add one thing, and you're quite right. As the city grows, the cost to run the city grows. And just as individual residents and taxpayers are faced with inflation, so is the city. And that's reflected in our suggested tax increase to this point, although nothing has been settled. The other point that I would like to mention, though, Your Worship, is I think it's fair to say that we are investigating on a number of fronts the concept of moving towards more user pay in our facilities rather than have the general taxpayer carry the burden for everything. And I think that's fair in a number of instances where the people who use the services bear the brunt of paying for them. So I think that's a direction that we are headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I would say we would work on balancing it with, we have to prioritize our fire, our police, our emergency services, and those are mandatory for our public safety. And so what we have to do is we may not always be able to have what we would like to have. There are additions, and we will focus on what we must have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Roque.
Okay. Well, we would love to take a question from the audience if there is one. Nope, not at this time. The next question, Council, would be, would Council consider increasing DCCs to make developers fund new infrastructure for its entire life cycle cost, from installation to replacement, which would hopefully lessen the burden of asset replacement on cities?
Thank you very much. I've saw this question earlier today, and it's based on the premise that we have some desire to grow constantly, which I don't think is fairly accurate. And I notice Councillor Brown has put his name forward, so I'm going to give the opportunity to him.
I was just going to provide comment when you were finished, so but I'm happy to. DCCs are essentially for capital that is expansion of projects expansion of items caused by growth. However, the legislation is very limiting in what it can be used for. For example, rec facilities, fire halls, policing pressures, and I'm talking about the capital structures here, do not fall under existing legislation. And the city of Nanaimo, I believe in our first term, but even other local governments previously, have consistently and regularly pushed the provincial government for changes to this legislation as it is dated and does not give modern municipalities the flexibilities to have DCCs that reflect the services that their citizens want and expect, but receive pressure from growth. So,
thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Ms. Roque.
Okay, so the next question is, the 2022 to 2026 project plan reflects some large fluctuations in budgets from year to year for some areas. For example, parks, transportation, and water infrastructure. Would it be better to smooth expenditures over the years and avoid large fluctuations?
I think, in fairness, the fluctuations are not dramatic, and certain expenditures are required depending on the nature of the facility. We have some very old pipe, and it has to be replaced. And sometimes you get a dramatic break, as we did, I guess, a year and a half ago on Bowen Road, and the city has to react. We have no choice. And part of the whole point of the asset management program and the 1% annual increase is to ensure that those kinds of expenditures are in fact financed by the creation of funds necessary to do so. We do have a number of funds that we have to maintain. As Councillor Brown pointed out, around DCCs, for instance, only to be used for limited purposes. And that is one way we even out these expenses. It's not as if we say we need a fire hall this year and we're going to build a walkway next year and we're going to do something else the year after that. Many of these things take time, are phased in over time planning, and you may see work, for instance, on even fairly minor individual construction projects that start in the fall. Part of the budgetary year is this year, and part of it will be spent in the budgetary year next year.
Okay. Perhaps this would be the
Councillor Bonner wants to respond as well, please.
Apologies, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Hate following you on these sort of things, but it's my understanding that just because we have a projects budget of 16 million one year and say 3 million the next does not necessarily mean that there's a large tax increase and a smaller tax increase, because those particular funds are paid out of reserves and other budgets that have already been included in years previous. So it's the city has a 10-year plan and even a 20-year plan in terms of the projects that we're working on, and it's costed out that. So it's not an equal amount each year. It depends on which project is. And I want to thank Ms. Mercer for explaining to me how all this sort of stuff works. And I'm a good student, I hope.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Ms. Froki?
Okay, perhaps this is a good time to bring up a slide from our 2022 budget survey that we asked the public to complete. If you give me just a moment here. We ran the survey from October 22nd until last night. We had 253 respondents, and this slide in particular, I'm not sure if you can see it well enough, but it asks, what are your priorities for the city's upcoming financial plan, which is why we're here tonight. And out of the order of the priorities, the top three were recreation services, then followed by parks, trails, and open spaces, climate and environment, and so forth. So just to give yourselves and the audience who did not have a chance to or were not aware of the survey to see what others have been putting as their priorities, and of course those who have participated to see the collective response from themselves and others who have. So throughout the night I'll be jumping back and forth between the results that we've received from this particular survey and other fun facts for you. Thank you. So the next question is, the new collective agreement for RCMP members means the city taxpayers are responsible for a significant retro payment and increased contract cost. How much of the cost of the RCMP contract is covered by the federal government, and how much is paid by the city? The second part of this question is, will the city be lobbying higher levels of government to address the impacts of the new collective agreement with the city?
Thank you very much for the question. We pay 90% pardon me, of our policing costs. Councillor Armstrong is going to jump in here in a minute, being the ex-RCMP officer that she is. And I can assure the questioner that Nanaimo itself, along with every other municipality in British Columbia that contracts for policing services with the RCMP, is asking for special assistance from the federal government. We were all advised to set aside what was believed to be an appropriate amount of money to cover the potential increase. It turned out to be a low ball, as to use the vernacular, and thus we are stuck with a rather extraordinary extra cost this year. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's 90% for the municipality and then 10%, which is from the federal government, which means 15 positions are paid by the federal government and the other, I think it's 151 are by the city. And as for the retro pay, nobody thought that they'd go back that many years. I think that's part of the problem. But just to put it into perspective, even with the increase in the wages, the RCMP still is 41 in the country, and they were supposed to be in the top 4. So it's still, and out of that, all the BC municipal forces are still ahead of them. So be prepared. There's going to be more coming, I believe. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. I think the author of the question has really hit upon something which has caught us all a little bit by surprise, this costing of the retro pay for our CMP, although in my opinion it's well deserved, is something that we did not totally anticipate having to budget for. And so it's thrown a bit of a last minute wrench into our calculations, and it certainly will have an effect on our decision making. So it's a tough one. It's not of our making, but we're faced with it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sroki?
Okay. I'm just going to check in with our audience members. No questions? Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions? Okay. Next question. Frank Crane Arena is an aging major sports facility. When will plans for replacing it be incorporated into the budget?
Councillor Thorpe, are you left over? You aren't going to want to answer
No,
this one.
I'll jump in first on this one, Your Worship. Thank you. I'll jump in. It's an area that interests me greatly. And I recall during the campaign of 2018, I was approached by somebody involved with minor hockey and stated at that time that they wanted to make a new arena or a replacement arena a top priority. And to be honest, I've heard nothing from them since. And I think it would be wonderful. It'd be very nice to have a new Frank Crane Arena or a replacement. But I think the key word there is it would be nice. And Councillor Martman hit the nail on the head earlier. With all of our budget constraints and challenges, we have to focus on what is urgent, what is needed, rather than what is nice. And for the time being, Frank Crane Arena, although it served us well, it continues to, I think, satisfy the needs of the community. Not to say that it will as we grow and move forward, but for the time being, it's all right. But to answer the question in another way, and maybe this will give the writer some solace, our staff has undertaken an assessment management review of all our recreational facilities. I understand they've completed 23 out of 34 of the major facilities, and they are going to be putting together a comprehensive list identifying our needs and our priorities for repair or replacement. So Frank Crane Arena will certainly show up on that list. We'll see how it stacks up against the need to repair or replace other facilities, and eventually it will become a top priority. But right now, the honest answer is it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Sroki.
Okay, so if I can just take a few minutes and point out the next slide that we've got up here from the 2022 budget survey. It's on, just dive deeper a little bit about the prioritization of recreation services. So on there you see you've got aquatics, arenas, and out of 159 respondents, you've got 16 interested in arenas. Predominantly others were involved in other, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to guess what is the most up and coming sport that has a vegetable name that might be pickled in it.
Pickleball.
There you go. It was pretty amazing. Pickleball was quite prominent in the others ask, followed by bike courses, particularly mountain biking and indoor activities. Again, pickleball being heavily lobbied for and very passionate written submissions with facts about how it's the fastest growing in North America, just so you know. Thank you. That you can take down that slide and go back to the main e-town hall slide. Okay, so the next question is, what is the justification of increasing city taxes when times are bad and inflation is rising inflation is rising for homeowners with mortgages as well as those who rent? And how does this action feed into the donut economy?
I'm not seeing anyone jump forward on the donut aspect of this, but I think it's fair to say, and I don't say this with any lack of sympathy, for many in this community, notwithstanding we are in the midst of COVID, if you are involved in construction, car sales, real estate sales, delivery of all kinds of services, these are not tough times for you, with great respect. If you are homeless, suffering from mental health, addictions, or brain injury issue, these are horrible times. In terms of a tax increase, as Councillor Thorpe pointed out earlier, we do face annually inflation, and the inflation the city faces for its expenses is different than the average household. Not a lot of households in Nanaimo are buying steel pipe or girders or paying for sewer upgrades or things of that nature, but the city does. We're not spending a lot on groceries at City Hall, and so there is very much a difference. It is impossible, I think, in fairness, and would be almost irresponsible in a city of this size with this kind of growth to anticipate that we could ever have no tax increase in a given year. We would simply be postponing the expense to another generation. Having lived through the last 30 years in this country where deficits and debt were the buzzword politically for a long time, certainly in the 90s, it's become apparent with the crisis in our streets that cutting back on a national housing program, eliminating supports for people with mental health and addiction issues, may have seemed like good politics and good government policy at the time, but in the 21st century, in 2021, the results of those policies don't look quite as nice in the streets of our communities as small businesses struggle to survive and families cry out for assistance for their loved ones. I've got Councillors Gesselbrock, Armstrong, Bonner, and Brown in order, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in terms of the tax increases in the donut economy, I think the goal with the city's donut framework is that we're just really clear what our goals are as a community in terms of addressing our greenhouse gas emissions, affordability, our goals around mobility, and that makes it very clear in our budget that what we're spending our money on is helping us achieve our goals. And I think that's something that we're working towards to make clear so that everyone understands what expenses are going to what. I think in terms of taxation as well, the tax increases that we're facing, we do have to keep up with inflation. And in past years, when the city did not increase taxation at a reasonable rate, even at around 2%, basically that just offloads the increase down the road. And that's partly what we're having to face at the moment. I think that what's being presented is quite reasonable, and hope very clear that we demonstrate what we're spending money on. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I was just going to add to that. It's the same thing for the city as it is for a homeowner, that inflation hits you and it hits the city just as much. We have taxes going up because we have to pay for new police officers, new firemen, new city staff, et cetera. Everybody wants their roads fixed. Those cost money. The cost of doing business because of COVID, I think in some projects has exceeded 20 to 30% over the initial cost. So it's no different than you as a homeowner. The city is facing the exact same things, and in order to keep our stuff, we have to do maintenance. And if we don't do maintenance, it's going to cost a lot more, a lot later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Similar to Councillor Gesselbrock there, if you look at the amount of taxes and tax increases over the last 8 years, had we contributed in the first 4 years of it a 2.5 or 3.5% tax increase, our tax increases right now would be much less. because we would have already had the money in the city, coming into the city on a regular basis. In terms of the donut model isn't don't do things. It's like don't cut trees down, don't build roads. That's not how the donut model works. It recognizes that we do need to build roads. We are going to have to cut some trees down, and we are going to have to do all these other things, but we have to stay within a medium so that we're not going too high, we're not going too low. And as we develop and grow as a city, we need to stay inside the donut model and not do things that cause us to drift out. So, the question regarding how come you're increasing taxes when it has that to do with the donut model doesn't really correlate. It just means that when we are looking at the donut model, and as we go forward and looking at our parameters of how we're going to measure it, we have to make sure that we as a city can stay within this middle part of the donut. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the donut isn't a zero. No, I just wanted to add that we do have the annual contribution of 1% to asset management reserve, and I think it's important to highlight that because if memory serves me correct, and I'm looking at Ms. Mercer if I'm wrong here, we have a $200 million infrastructure gap, and I think this year we have about 8.8 million of cumulative 1% going into the asset management reserve. So I highlight that because what it suggests, and not out of maybe necessarily willfully, but that there is in the past, things haven't been taxed for in terms of their replacement costs. So just to replace even existing infrastructure, we're having to tax for that asset management aspect of it, let alone service increases or changes, new services, et cetera, et cetera. So historically, Nanaimo is not unique and probably better than a lot out there. I do know that, and especially with some of the changes in recent years, that we can be thankful for some great leadership from our finance department in that regard. There has been a shortfall when it comes to properly analyzing and accounting for your existing assets, and that has to be factored into decision making. Unfortunately, nobody wants to do it, but it is a reality.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mercer, did you want to add something?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah, that we have a gap, and we know going into the future that we're probably, as we add more assets to that, and if we're not putting an appropriate amount of money away, that gap will continue to be there forever, and we'll continue to tax for it. So.
Thank you. Ms. Froki.
Just for the benefit of new residents to Nanaimo, Your Worship, to Ms. Mercer, or Your Worship, if you can answer, what is the amount that the city is responsible in regards to infrastructure?
Our assets, I believe, total something in the order of $3 billion. And I see Mr. Sims and our CAO and Ms. Mercer all nodding sagely, and so I must be right if the three of them agree with me.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Next question. Vehicle traffic is increasing along Nanaimo side streets due to development and infilling, causing unsafe conditions for pedestrians along these narrow streets with no shoulders. What immediate steps will the city take to address these conditions? For example, will you commit to implementing slow streets like the City of Vancouver?
Councillor Armstrong.
I'll just add, you can go to slow streets, but their accident levels haven't changed. The injuries aren't as severe. That's one thing it does. But one of the things sometimes I have to wonder is you got to walk facing traffic. A lot of people don't. I know people aren't going to agree with that, but there are things that you have to do. I know that there was considerable concern around 7th Avenue, but the simple fact was there just wasn't the road space to put in sidewalks, so staff did the best they could with what we had available based on that. So you have to look at some of those. You have to look at that when a lot of our city was built, they weren't built for sidewalks, and the area is not there to put them in. So the city prioritizes them. We just went through a GPC last week, I believe it was, where the city went over how we're prioritizing for sidewalks. It's very interesting to watch. So it's gonna take all that information and try and do it. But you have to recall, or you have to remember, it cost a lot of money to build sidewalks, a lot of money. And a lot of times there's just not the street width or the availability to put them in. I think our staff does very good work trying to do the best they can, and I think the new system that they're implementing will make a difference for that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Slower streets do mean less accidents and less harmful accidents. And I think that's something we should be working towards. A zero vision city would have much slower streets than the ones we have. Our streets were built to get cars from one point to another quite quickly, and that's causing the problems. We can spend a whole bunch of money on putting in sidewalks and all the other things that make people relatively safe and allow the cars to go faster, or we can just slow all the cars down and not bother having to spend all that money on infrastructure, and we will have a safer streets. So I guess me and Councillor Armstrong necessarily agree on this whole thing, but that's the way I believe we should be. Slower streets are a safer city.
I think the answer from two councillors represents philosophical considerations as well, views about what the latest studies and reports do show. I do want to add this, though, in terms of the amenities. As I've said many times before, this city has too much geography and too little population, and the city is certainly very carefully, wherever a new development is proposed, insisting, generally speaking, on the provision of sidewalks. It leads to a bit of a gap-tooth appearance occasionally on streets and neighborhoods. I appreciate that. But it also means the cost is, if you will, added to the cost of the development. It is a cost for the developer and a cost for the new homeowner. But it is filling in sidewalks in places where they didn't exist. And candidly, if anyone was laying out a city, if you look at our street patterns in various areas, particularly older parts of the city, they were designed for horse and buggies. Then we put cars on them. Now we're trying to figure out how to make things safer and easier. So we love our cul-de-sacs. People love to buy homes in cul-de-sacs, and I see Mr. Sims smiling. Have you ever tried to plow a cul-de-sac in a snowstorm? Have you ever tried to get an emergency vehicle in and out of a cul-de-sac when it's lined with cars that are parked around it? Every time we have a solution or some good idea about what works, it does have other consequences, and the city does its best. And I'm hoping Councillor Martin now, who's on the list, will say something that'll just wrap this all up very well. Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one item, that Nanaimo is waiting for the provincial pilot program to apply slower speed limits. So it is on our radar. It is something we're paying attention to.
Thank you very much. Ms. Verocchi.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to check in with the audience to see if they have any questions. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Ask me 3 times, I'll ask. There you go. We have a question from the audience.
Even though the mayor sent me an email today trying to dissuade me.
I just indicated, Mr. Barclay, I didn't want you to ask question after question all night, but I
don't
you'd at least ask one.
So my question pertains to total property taxes and utility fees. So I was looking at going back 5 years, and I noted that my total property taxes in the past 5 years have increased 44%. 28% of that is the city, and the other is primarily regional district. The regional district, that component, has gone up 60% in the last 5 years. And then I watched the first regional district meeting that I've seen for a long time, and it was scary. It's predicting that, this is budget planning, that your regional district fees would go up 56% over the next 5 years. 60% plus another 56%. That's frightening. Plus my utility fees have gone up 58% in the last 5 years. So my question to council is, how do you consider the total property taxes faced by varied, not just an average, because an average is not fair. You have to look at varied citizens in Nanaimo when you are planning your budget?
That's a very good question, and I'm anxious to see other councillors answer this, but I'll offer an initial answer. As Mr. Barclay points out, 8 of us sit on the Regional District Board. The Regional District delivers services. The city delivers services. They are different services. Regional District delivers transit. We don't deliver transit services. Do all of us, I think, consider the cumulative cost? Yes. With respect to your individual situation, it may be that your home has risen faster or higher in price than other areas of town. That is an explanation that Ms. Mercer has to point out, or Ms. Wardle, to various taxpayers from time to time. Is the cumulative amount oppressive? Depending on family incomes, can be. But we all know that the provincial government has provided a program if you're a senior where you can defer your taxes. In addition, generally speaking, if your taxes have risen more substantially than the projected general rate increase, it means also, in fairness, that the value of your home has increased dramatically too, which is a non-taxable benefit. But I've got councillors Martman, Bonner, Armstrong, and Brown in order, please.
I'll make it quick. You stole my thunder because my question was going to be, how much did your property raise? Because that's what's driving up so much of our taxes. And I, like many of us on council, we own property. And so my taxes may have gone up $500, and I'm in the low end. I'm in Harewood. My taxes average $1,500 with the grant. It goes up $500, but my property value went up like 50 or 100,000. So we have no control over that. So people have to remind themselves that they have equity, that they've earned money, which is not taxable. So, and another thing is, I find it disturbing to use percentages sometimes, because we can say that something went up 44%, but if we're going 44% on $3.50, it's actually not that much. So I think we really should talk dollar and cents. And the last time when I was looking at the budget, I was thinking it's actually gone up about $12, and this was including fees, the increase, and we're just working our way through it right now. But if it's an average of $100, $150 a year for the increase, and you're breaking it down to $12 a month, you're breaking it down to $3 a week. So in the big perspective of what we receive in our services for our water, clean drinking water in our city, our sewer we look after, our garbage, our fire, our police, our emergency services, everything we receive, I feel we really get a big bang for our buck. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. The property tax system, I believe, is an antiquated, old system of raising money for municipalities and probably should be relooked at. Unfortunately, that is the role of the province to do that. I would much prefer to see no property taxes and a value-added tax, similar to our PST, where municipalities are allocated a certain amount of money from the province through this value-added tax. That would be a much more fair tax system. The problem we have with our particular tax system, and specifically to Nanaimo, is that it's becoming a very popular place to be. And we're seeing a disproportionate amount of increase in property values to properties that were quite low generally on scale. In matter of fact, 2 years ago, we saw some very large properties, their actual value of the property went down, and some of those actually saw a decrease in their taxes, even though we'd raised the taxes, whatever percentage was that year. So from my point of view, and I think we've tried to lobby this to the government, is like, and at least I would certainly be interested in, is moving to a value tax base. In addition to that, the city doesn't tax taxpayers 100% for our budget. It's only a certain percentage. And I would like to see the city look at other options of raising funds other than raising taxes. And that could be things like we've looked into in the past of sponsorships and various other things, a way the city could actually generate income as opposed to, in this case, taxing taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Armstrong, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you. What I would say is that I think this council works really hard at all line budget. We look at them and we make some decisions where one year we're going for something and then we realize, you know what, we're not going to be able to, so we remove it. So I think there's those discussions are going to happen, and they'll happen probably in the next couple of weeks, where we're going to have some hardcore decisions. Are we going to keep this road in, that sidewalk in, whatever, just for the sake of argument? Those will be things that we look at. And as Councillor Bonner said, we can basically only function through property tax. We don't have the ability for other taxes like the provincial government does. So all our operating costs have to come through taxation. Even sponsorships would not bring in a huge amount of money, but would help offset some, like grants or something. So that's one of the big issues. But I do know that, and I agree, I think with what Councillor Martman said, when you actually take the 44% and you actually put it into dollar form, which I think is really important, and Ms. Mercer does give that to us, so it'd be like the average cost for a homeowner this year, including user fees, might be a total of $180. And then you put over the 12 months, you can see that it's not as large. It's still significant for a lot of people, but in terms of percentage versus actual dollars, usually the dollar amount is quite lower. But the other issue that we do have is that we do have, like, prime example, when you talk about the RDN, we've got a hospital build coming up that's going to cost the taxpayers of the regional district $400 million because it's a 60-40 split. So those are significant funding things that we have to do, and the only way we can do it is through taxation. So unless, like Councillor Bonner says, we can find another way of doing it, I think we're going to be having the same conversations for years because we only have the taxes.
And finally, Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Much has been touched on, but I think Mr. Barclay accurately raises the issue with property taxation that I know formally and informally we've talked around this table as councillors, with staff. I know people that have worked a long time for local government have bemoaned and complained that property taxation is problematic because it ultimately is blind to income and is subject to fluctuations in the property market that can in very real ways impact some folks more than others, and those that are living closer on the edge are the ones that feel it the most. And so we can definitely sympathize with that. And I do think it's about time that there was changes to how we raise property taxes, or fund local governments, but that's a whole other conversation that we could talk about for hours. But with respect to the RDN, I think it's important to highlight that over the past 4 or 5 years, but planning prior to that was the Greater Nanaimo Pollution Control Secondary Treatment Upgrade Project, which also added capacity. That was an $80 million plus project, the most expensive and largest capital project, definitely north of the Malahat on the island. That secondary treatment was mandated by higher orders of government to do, just like the Nanaimo water treatment plant. So significant costs that came through higher level of government regulations, and while there was some grant fundings which are always graciously received, they were a fraction of the overall cost of, in both cases, those projects. So very large capital intensive projects that ultimately are good things, but they were, the requirement was pushed down on us from higher orders of government. As Councillor Armstrong indicated, on the horizon, there is some big hospital expenses. We know we have a list of over 20 urgent, and there's a strong medical case for different upgrades at NRGH, but we know 3 urgently are the Cancer Treatment Center, cardiac services, and a new patient tower, long overdue, but they are, $1 billion I think is even being a little generous. They are 1.5, I think, for getting into it, and as she highlighted, we're responsible for 40% of those capital costs under the current funding paradigm. So questions there. Big expenses on the horizon, even if we take out things like planned transit increases and all those sort of things that people are demanding. We have genuine needs in the community, and it does become very difficult to balance them and rise to those with property taxes. So always open to new ideas on how the burden can be lessened, but it is a tricky question that people have been grappling with for quite some time.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just quickly piggyback on some of the earlier comments, and I guess I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Barclay's question was, except that it related to the number of different taxes that residents are faced with, and I think everybody at this table is sympathetic to that. There are RDN taxes, that we collect taxes on behalf of the hospital, on behalf of the school district, and those all add up. But we are mindful of that. But our main responsibility at this table is to deal responsibly with the demands of running the city of Nanaimo and providing the goods and services and facilities that our residents want and need and expect, and to do that in hopefully as economical fashion as possible, and being very mindful and responsible of taxpayers' money. But as other councillors have pointed out, there are huge capital projects, important projects at the RDN with water treatment and so on, the landfill. There's the hospital situation, which is going to be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And even within the city of Nanaimo, we are faced with some fairly urgent capital projects that will again be tens of millions of dollars. I'm talking about replacement for the RCMP building, which I think is fairly urgent, our operations center, the public works yard, which I think is a top priority. And we have to look at how we fund those. And we are stuck, like it or not, with a formula for property tax collection, and that's what we have to use. And so it makes it very hard to prioritize and to be able to deal with those demands, being as careful as we can be with the burden that we put on taxpayers. So nobody said the job was easy, but all I can say is that we are aware of the challenges and we are aware of the pressures on the taxpayer, and we try to do our best. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farokhi.
This next question ties into capital infrastructure quite well, in my opinion. For too long, the establishment of a fire hall on Hammond Bay at Nottingham Drive has been delayed as being too expensive. Each year, it is getting more expensive, and each year, the citizens in the Steveston Point and Hammond Bay area are being denied this life-saving service. When will this project be included in the budget?
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I think one of the issues with that is I believe, and I know our chief is here, but under our previous chief, Chief Fry, she did not think that was the right location at this date and time. So I think that's an issue that has to be looked at. It was her opinion that that previous cited location would no longer meet the needs of the community. So I'm sure that's something that Chief Doyle will be looking at and maybe bringing forward to us at another date. But that's one of the main reasons, is that the chief, in her estimation, at the time, chief at the time, said that that was no longer a viable place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. And I do believe we are undertaking a fire services review that we'll be looking at, and that will be coming forward to council shortly, that we'll be looking at, a whole bunch of things, but one of them being where future fire halls should go in respect to overall response times and providing the best service coverage and response time for the whole city.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. It just occurred to me that related to the topic of infrastructure needs and capital projects, through your mayor's leaders table, there is a working group looking to develop a comprehensive list, a wish list, if you would, of capital projects that our community would benefit from. And that task force is gathering that information. All organizations are welcome to contribute their thoughts and ideas. And then that list will be, to some extent at least, prioritized with cost figures attached. And that will help us make decisions as we move forward. And certainly the fire department will be closely involved in terms of their expertise in any future expansion to fire service facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may add one thing to this, and this is an issue, is the question of cell phone towers and coverage in certain parts of the city. With great respect, if we can have the best fire hall with the best staff and the best firefighters in the world, but if your phone can't get to 911, we're no further ahead, and that is certainly an issue in that part of the community. Ms. Farokhi.
Next question. Why are we contemplating a major investment in a waterfront walkway during a climate crisis and not contemplating buying forested land?
That's a very interesting proposition, and there are many programs and corporations and charities that do advocate purchasing forested lands, particularly in those parts of the world where the forests are being depleted at a rapid rate with very little payback either to workers or to the local governments. I'm going to let Councillor Gesselbrock jump in, though.
Well, thank you, Worship. I think this speaks to sort of understanding about the donut economy, and I think what we need to do is just be very clear what our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals are, and work within that. So all the decisions, when we put forward a new project, be it a waterfront walkway, whether it be parkland acquisition, that they are all meeting the goals that we've set out to do in terms of protecting, at-risk environmental areas, or meeting our greenhouse gas emissions, or protecting our watershed. And so I think that the goals that we set will set the stage for what decisions we do, and then the decisions that we make, we need to evaluate them, whether they're going to meet the goals that we've set out or not. And so that's what we hope to establish as a framework. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to give credit, I suppose, to previous councils that I think have done a wonderful job of preserving forest land in the Nanaimo area. And I look back no more than 6 years ago to the purchase of Lindley Valley, which was a huge purchase, and preserved a wonderful area of the city right in the middle of the north end. So I think we have done a lot. And I think in terms of the waterfront walkway, that is a huge project. It will likely have to go to referendum, apparently, to see if the voters still support it. But it is, in my mind, an opportunity for improving active transportation and also improving the shore of that entire area. So I think there are a lot of pluses to that as well. So it's always a balancing act, but I don't think it has to be one against the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Roque.
Okay. Next question is, the City of Victoria recently launched a music strategy. Is there anything planned for Nanaimo to expand support for the arts industry? We have a public art program, poet laureate program, etc., but support for musicians and venues seem to be limited.
I'm going to politely suggest that arts and culture are never off the table in this community. There is certainly a growing and loud advocacy for an arts center of some sort. But this community, as I have pointed out in previous years, have things that other communities don't. And I believe I used the example of someone who said, why don't we have a beautiful facility like the old schoolhouse gallery in Nanaimo? And I responded, you're absolutely right. I'd love to have that kind of facility in Nanaimo. But then again, why do the good voters of Qualicum Beach not have a Port Theatre equivalent? We have a Port Theatre, they have the old schoolhouse gallery. And to follow on what Councillor Thorpe said earlier, it's not a question of either or. But certainly there have been priorities around arts and culture in this community that have given us the Port Theatre, that venue, the Old Bailey Theatre, Theatre 1 on Halliburton, between Halliburton and between the Old Highway and Victoria Crescent. But I think it's a worthwhile comment, and I will accept to some extent the criticism, but we do have various grants that we pass out each year as well, and Councillor Bonner is coming to my rescue, so I'm going to pass it to him.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're not doing as much as we would like to, but we're not doing nothing either. The new work that the city did on the OV, which is now called the OV, not Theatre 1, it was substantial, and that building will now last for many, many years, much past than what we thought it was going to. So there's the work there, and that's an entire theater facility that can also be used for live music and various other things, which is available to the public. We also have, in the past, provided more long-term lease arrangements to arts communities so that they could apply for federal funding. And that was not necessarily available on short-term leases. So those are some of the things we'd hit. Could we do more? Absolutely. I'm sure we could build quite a few more facilities. We just have to increase the taxes by another 5%, and away we go.
And before I go to Councillor Armstrong, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that magnificent welcome totem that is now down Swilana Lagoon. Cheryl, Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you. I think the other thing too that you have to look at, and I refer to the chart, what are your priorities for the city's upcoming thing, and actually culture was the last out of everything. So when we have to balance priorities, I personally look at some of that stuff to see what people are bringing in. And so when that's the very last of people's priorities, that's something that you look at. And I know that's something that maybe the arts and culture community needs to do some more work to help us with that. I personally would love to see the gallery style that we used to have at the Malaspina University, where there's showings of local artists similar to the old schoolhouse. And just to the old schoolhouse, a lot of that, the funds for the old schoolhouse was raised by the community, just so people are aware of that as well. But I think there's some really valid points, and I agree with the mayor. We do need to take criticism, because we certainly have no problem spending a lot of money on sporting facilities, and we do ignore the arts to a degree. So I agree with his point on that. Thank you.
And Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And on top of that, because of COVID, our music hasn't been in our communities. We haven't had these public events, something that we do support. And I lost my train of thought about arts and culture is important, and it's actually an economic driver in our province, is arts and culture. So again, when we think of our priorities, though, it ends up being, is it nice to have? So yes, we would love to have it, but how much taxes do you want to pay?
Thank you. Ms. Svaroki.
For the benefit of the community who may have just been tuning in, what I believe Councillor Armstrong was referring to in regards to the priorities was this chart that we showed earlier on. And this chart is from the 2022 budget survey that we took, just to get a pulse of the community of what they'd like to see prioritized in the 2022 to 2026 budget.
I think if the viewing audience can see it more clearly than I can on the screen, and I have it in front of me, it's a pretty telling document. 244 responses, and I'm just going to go through them because I think it will be of interest to people who are listening. Top priority, question options, 152 for recreation services in order, 131 for parks, trails, and open spaces, 95 for climate and the environment, 76 for public safety, 59, pardon me, for public safety, that was social issues. Public safety was 59, 47 for infrastructure, 42 for economic development, 40 for active transportation, 20 for other, and 14 for cultural services. Now, I don't think we should vote as council ever on the basis of that kind of voluntary polling, but it does give council some indication of what people's priorities are. And I must pay my compliments to Mr. Groot, who's here tonight representing Parks, Recreation and Culture, obviously fairly popular in our city, and thus the priority that the people want to see given to it.
Council, Your Worship, with your permission, Mr. Sims reminded me of a very important initiative that you have undertaken under Reimagine Nanaimo, and that is looking at the parks, recreation, and of course, the culture side of things. And I believe some information is going to be coming to you or has come to you. And of course, phase 3 of Reimagine Nanaimo will be starting in the new year, which will highlight a little bit more about what the future of arts and culture in the community will look like. So if you'd like to take a moment to remind the audience about that process, please do so.
The Reimagine Nanaimo process, for those who haven't been paying attention, and I think it's been pretty hard to miss because city staff have been working very effectively, and my compliments to all of them who've participated in ensuring that people in Nanaimo understood that we are in the middle of and have accomplished a great deal already in a re-examination and assessment of the city's OCP, the city's cultural plans, the city's transportation plans, all of the plans to try and bring people together to understand, appreciate what we have and what they want the city to look like in the future. We're anticipating completion of the process next year. I want to compliment the several thousand citizens in Nanaimo who have taken the time to participate. Because quite candidly, it's like my response to people who complain about the politicians they elect. I ask them first if they actually voted in the election. Everyone had an opportunity to participate in Reimagine Nanaimo, certainly correlating all of the information now, but it will help determine what the city will look like, and is a lovely play on the Imagine Nanaimo process under my friend, the late Joy Leach, which was in the city to some extent pulled itself into the 20th century by examining carefully what kind of city did we want to become, as opposed to just developing all rather willy-nilly and in response to public needs. So the Reimagine Nanaimo process, information available on the city website for those of you who haven't participated. Take a look, see what people are thinking, talk to your neighbors. No decisions have been made, but council will be making decisions next year. And the more information we have, and I see everyone nodding, the better will be the decision we make on your behalf.
Okay.
Ms. Faroki.
Next question is there anything in the proposed budget that will help ensure that low-income families can afford to live in Nanaimo with the cost of houses rising and so rapidly?
This city, some time ago, under previous council, instituted a policy which I believe, and I'll look to anyone who can confirm, I believe, Mr. Lindsay, we're running something between 60 and 70% of new single-family dwellings in this community have what is referred to euphemistically as the mortgage helper, which is a secondary suite. We are approving and have approved a number of multi-unit residential building developments, thousands. We are seeing significant investment in the community. Our building permits are going to have another record year this year. But I have to say, candidly, the city simply does not have the tools that will deal with extremely low interest rates, a rampant speculative marketplace, which has seen significant purchase price increases across the board in this country, but particularly in what is a very desirable part of the world, which is this community. Mr. Lindsay, I wonder if you wanted to add anything to that.
Your Worship, you had the stats exactly right, so I won't go back over those, but I would add that Council's adopted an affordable housing strategy and has been taking efforts to implement that strategy, including most recently dealing with short-term rentals and addressing that, and are now moving on to look at family-friendly and adaptive housing policies. So there is work under your strategy that's actively being done.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you. And I believe you were saying low income. What will the city do? Was that the question? I understand. Okay. So the other part besides housing is also helping to provide food security. So we purchased the 5-acre farms, which food share works with Loaves and Fishes. We help support our local food bank, and we work with local not-for-profits to help support in grants and other ways that we can help make low-income people have a little bit better support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're almost wrapping up. We're very close to wrapping up our e-town hall. So I'm just going to ask the audience to see if they have any questions. Yourself? No questions? Okay. Now, the next question that we have is, our city is spending hundreds of thousands on homeless issues, including bylaws, RCMP both general and bicycle, and also for security restricted to downtown core. Why is the city spending this money for an issue that requires the province's cooperation to solve? Why are taxpayers funding security for the downtown and the old city quarter instead of the respective BIAs? Can funding be reduced and bylaw officers focused on enforcing our bylaws? That's a 4-question in one.
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to give credit right off the bat to Councillor Bonner. I think it's the analogy he's used. If you think of the mental health, addictions, brain injury, homelessness crisis as a situation where you're in a lifeboat and it's got a leak in it and you're waiting to be rescued, I'm sorry, you just have to bail for the time being until the rescue ship comes, which is the province. And that is the situation this city and every other community of any size in this country finds itself. And if people can hear the anger and frustration in my voice rising, it is not grandstanding. It is a natural response to the human tragedy that fills our streets, that impacts on every citizen, every business owner, and many employees in this community who try and pass by open drug use and abuse and human misery every day on their way to their workplaces. We have no choice. There is no progress to be made in dealing with people who have severe mental health and addiction issues by shuffling them out of a doorway where they spent the night, if they're lucky, if they have a doorway to sleep in. There is no progress to be made, but we have no choice. And until society is prepared, and by society in the larger sense, I mean particularly the province and the federal government recognizes this and makes it the political priority that the volume of emails, correspondence, and discussion we as councillors and members of council have with our citizens makes it the priority that it is clearly in the minds of citizens, it will not improve significantly. But before I turn to Councillor Armstrong, let me finish my short rant on a somewhat positive note. We are going to see dozens of units opened at 702 Nickel Street of supportive housing. Another supportive housing unit is going up in the site of the old community services building across from the police station. The seniors units at Buttertub should be open soon, I would hope, if they're not already, without much public announcement. Subsidized rental units at Brecon United Church's old site. There is progress being made. It's not all negative, but it is not enough to deal with these issues. But I will, with respect to use that worn cliche, I will make no apologies for dealing with the issue as best we can with resources we have in the way we have to, because we really don't have any other choice. In terms of advocacy, this council and this city in particular, I think has been extremely effective in advocating on behalf of the needs of this community and the priority it wants given to dealing with these issues. I'm a member of the BC Union of the Union of BC Urban BC Mayors group. 13 of us representing 55% of the population. We've had meetings with the Premier, the Minister responsible for mental health and addictions, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General. So we continue to advocate. But whoever asked the question, I appreciate the question, and I hope that they will take the time to advocate as well with their local MLA, whoever that may be, and write to the Premier, write to the Attorney General, who is chair of the Cabinet Committee that is dealing with this issue very specifically, and make your views known, please. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I agree with much of what the mayor said. I said, and the other big thing that we're really missing is the ability for people to access free mental health supports. Unless you've got money in this city, and even probably mostly in the province, it's very difficult to access mental health supports, and even in a timely manner. So I think that's one of the biggest issues, because a lot of these people that do have their mental health issues, they're not getting the support. So what do? We've seen it time and time again. I really saw it in the last 10 years of my policing career, where people started to self-medicate, and when they self-medicate, then you start to get your drug addictions happening, because they're not getting the supports that they require from our public health. So again, as the mayor said, you need to advocate for that. I think another big issue that we're seeing, and I know the police can't comment it, but I certainly can now, and that's the lack of accountability of the justice system. When you keep seeing the same chronic offenders being released 5 or 6 times in a week and going out doing the same offenses, we've got a problem. And it is the same chronic offenders. It's not the homeless, like some people say. Yes, there are some homeless that are doing some crimes, absolutely no doubt, but it's the chronic offenders that are taking up most of the police's time. When I spoke to a police officer, and I believe Superintendent also made the mayor aware of it, arrested 7 times in 1 week and released every single time. We have the big accident on Highland Boulevard where the guy comes across the highway, wipes out 8 cars, 4 fail to attend courts. Why does he even have 1? But he's got 4. So until the justice system starts to look at some of that seriously, we're going to still keep having problems. And I mean, it doesn't mean you have to incarcerate them. It might mean that we need to go back to drug courts, mental health courts. Kamloops is piloting a mental health court. We used to do that back in the 80s. People they went into treatment. Now we don't do that anymore. They're just sent back out in the streets. So treatment has been taken off the table. I personally think we do far too much enabling. And I notice now in the latest research that LA is now moving away from enabling, and they're going to go to a different model, which I think will be interesting to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first, I agree with your comments and those of Councillor Armstrong. And I think the author of this question has really brought us to probably the most timely and urgent question that this council has had to wrestle with over the past couple of years, and that is what we have, I think, mistakenly referred to as a homelessness issue, and it's really a mental health issue. But yes, it's very frustrating that we have to spend taxpayers' money dealing with it. It's very frustrating that the RCMP have to spend an inordinate amount of their time dealing with mental health issues rather than chasing criminals. But that is the reality that we're faced with, and the bottom line is we have to act to do something within our power to ameliorate the problems. And so we are working to bring supportive housing to the city with some success, and we are working to improve security and safety, because for me, that's what it comes down to, is a feeling of public safety for our residents, that they feel comfortable being downtown or in any neighborhood. And if we can act to make that possible, then I think we have a duty to spend money to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say just a couple of words and then turn it over to Ms. Verocchi to close as Master of Ceremonies. I just want to thank all of you who've taken time tonight to either participate in person. Mr. Barclay, you get the prize award tonight. You're here on behalf of all the 100,000 citizens of Nanaimo. And I don't take that to mean no one cares about what happens at City Council. I'm quite seriously, I'm not being cheeky when I say that. I want to thank those of you who took the time to send in questions and pay interest to what happens at Council. Much appreciated. Ms. Verocchi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I echo what you have said. Thank you to all the participants who submitted their questions during this time, and of course participated in our survey. Clearly, local government issues matter, given the number of questions that we received and the varied questions. And with that, we thank you, and we look forward to future e-town hall with those of you who are online and in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give a minute to settle down the technology. Ms. Gurry?
I think we are ready, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. The next are committee minutes. They are just for receipt. No motion is required. The next is the motion for adoption of consent items. And I'm going to point out something interesting that Councillor Martman reminded me before we get to the adoption of those consent items, because the public doesn't always understand what's happened. When we have approved, the Finance and Audit Committee recommended the hiring of a manager for the Van Cortlandt Emergency Response Academy, I want the public to understand that that in fact will be a revenue generating position for the City of Nanaimo, and will in fact reduce the need for at least part of the tax increase that we were contemplating. So I give credit to Councillor Martman tonight for raising that. I would ask for a motion for adoption of the consent items. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no delegations unrelated to agenda items, but we do have some reports tonight. Mr. Lindsay, development permit application number DP 1223-340 Campbell Street.
Your Worship, sorry, Mr. Lindsay, just before you start, there is one person on Zoom with a phone number, and I just need to check before we start who that person is. And and ask them to change their name. I'm not sure if they heard me earlier, so I just don't want to not have somebody in the meeting that should be at their time. So if you don't mind, I just do a little housekeeping and check that.
Go right ahead, Ms. Gurry. You're
Thank
in
you.
charge.
So I'm just going to let them in the meeting and then ask them to change their number to a name. Hi there, this is Sheila Gurry from the city of Nanaimo. I've just admitted you in through Zoom, and you have a phone number showing on the screen, and we aren't sure who you are. If you have signed up to be a delegation, if you could change the phone number to your name, and that way we'll know you're registered. And if you're not a registered delegation, if you could sign out of Zoom, you're free to watch the council meeting on live stream or on Shaw TV cable television. So if you could just hover over your Zoom box, you can rename yourself to your name. And if not, we're going to put you back in the waiting room. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, and back to it. It's development permit application number DP 1223-340 Campbell Street. Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Holm tonight, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will turn it over to Mr. Holm just to briefly introduce, Your Worship, what I would describe as another exciting project and significant investment in our downtown core, and certainly happy to bring this forward for Council's consideration. I'll turn it over to Mr. Holm.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holm, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm happy to be here to introduce this application. This is a development permit application for 340 Campbell Street. This is from Urban Solutions Architecture Limited on behalf of Caledonia Holdings Limited. And this is for a 163 unit, what's proposed as a rental apartment. It's at the corner of Wallace and Campbell Street. In the downtown urban node. The property is on the screen overhead there. You can see it. Thank you. It's zoned DT3, Wallace zone within the city zoning bylaw. It's currently comprised of, as you can see on the screen, 4 separate parcels that are proposed to be consolidated into one parcel for the purpose of development of this 163 unit building. Again, it's on the corner of Campbell Street and Wallace Street, and it slopes approximately 5 meters along the Campbell Street frontage towards Wallace Street, which is the low point. If you could actually bring up attachment F, you'll see a rendering of the proposed development. This is formerly the site of the Caledonia Medical Clinic. You can see Wallace Street along the frontage, and then Campbell Street sloping up the side of the building there. It presents as a 6-story building on Wallace Street when viewed from Wallace, and it's 5 stories further up Campbell Street. It's incorporating underground parking, basically 2 layers of underground parking within the grade. And you're seeing fronting on Wallace Street Live Work Studios, which provide a nice animated street frontage and active street frontage on Wallace Street with canopies and entrances there for the live workspaces. It's also comprised of a mix of unit types, which is quite exciting, and looking at a number of studio as well as 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom residential units in addition to the live work studios that I mentioned previously. The building is designed, as I mentioned, to incorporate underground parking within the grade, which has been well developed there to suit the grade of the site. The proposal contains covered patios and entranceways fronting on the public sidewalk along Wallace Street and Campbell Street, with the main entrance to the building on Campbell Street. The design includes a distinctive base element that anchors the building, which is of a brick material, and it also includes some architectural features such as a mid frontage bay, recessed bay on the Wallace Street side, as well as the upper floor stepping back to provide amenity space and to diminish the mass of the building on the upper floor. As well as the brick elements, there are metal and wood accents and some fiber cement board siding as well. There's also, if you could bring up attachment G, that would be helpful just to show the landscape plan and details what the site planning looks like. There's a common interior amenity area that you can see there with interior courtyard access, as well as children's play area in that location. So again, fairly decent amenity space, as well as the upper floor step back to provide deck spaces up there that are also providing additional amenity space within the building. And yeah, the design panel received the application at its meeting on May 13th this year. They accepted the application as presented with support for proposed building height variance from 14 meters to 18.82 meters. The recommendations, there were recommendations provided by the design advisory panel that have been addressed in revisions by the applicant. The proposal, the relevant urban design plan and guidelines for the downtown recommend 5 to 6 story buildings at this location with underground parking on corner sites. So it creates a bit of a landmark building for a fairly high profile corner site in the downtown. And the subject property is not located within a public view corridor, and the height variance it does allow for 100% of the off-street parking to be fully concealed within the building. And that actually supports site design that would prioritize amenity space and pedestrian areas over parking areas by incorporating them into the building and diminishing their prominence on the site. The proposal complies with the applicable design guidelines, which include the downtown urban design planning guidelines, as well as the general development permit area design guidelines. And it complies with the official community plan policy for development within the downtown urban node. I'm happy to take questions, but I know the applicant's representative is available to also introduce the applicant and the ownership group and to answer questions as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. I'm not seeing any questions for you. I believe we have a delegation, Donald Yen, Urban Solutions Architecture and 340 Campbell Street Ltd. Partnership. Representative is available to also introduce.
To the delegation, if you could please turn off your live stream.
I'm not seeing any questions for you. I believe we have a delegation, Donald Yen, Urban Solutions Architecture and 340 Campbell Street Ltd.
Thank you, Your Worship. They'll just need a minute to catch up to me asking them that. So the delegation, if you can turn off your live stream and join the Zoom meeting. Just with the delay of the live stream, Your Worship, it'll take a second for them to hear me.
Can you wait?
There we go.
Good evening, Mr. Yen.
Good evening. My apologies. I was just in the technology problem here with shutting off the live stream.
No need to apologize. I just want to say that we can hear you loud and clear, which is good. You will have 5 minutes, and if you get to the end of the 4th minute, I will simply indicate to you you have approximately a minute left, please. So if you could introduce yourself just for the record, and then please proceed, and thank you.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Donald Yen, and I'm the architect for this very exciting project. On behalf of the ownership development group, which is actually the 340 Campbell Limited Partnership. So the aforementioned Caledonia Partnership is not the actual applicant now. Additionally, present in our delegations are the principals of the 340 Campbell Limited Partnership. Mr. Myron Kaloff is here, and Mr. Paul Williams. We also have Ms. Morgan Burke from the partnership as the project manager and acting as the owner's representative. I may ask her to introduce herself right after I speak as well. The 340 Campbell Limited Partnership is a Vancouver-based group who provides owner-built and operated rental housing focused on tenant livability. The ownership group has combined experience of over 20 years in multifamily housing developments. This owner-built and operated project, we believe, aligns with the ownership's commitments to provide affordable rental housing, to also support the OCP policy goals in the Northgate community, and really is a demonstration of the partnership's strong commitment to Nanaimo's aspirational goals, as I've heard tonight through many of your presentations. So I'd just like to end by just saying our delegation will be available for any questions that council may have. Maybe I'll just ask Ms. Morgan Burke to maybe introduce herself.
Through your worship, through you to the delegation, you are the only one that was signed up and that is currently on Zoom right now, Mr. Yen?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I have no further, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yen. Questions for Mr. Yen? Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Worship. In your initial presentation there, you mentioned that it's affordable rental housing. Are you basing that on the definition of affordable housing costing no more than 30% of household income before taxes, or that it's just going to be relatively market driven?
This is for myself?
Yes.
No, we're basing it on market driven, and the ownership group is pricing it accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the delegation as opposed to staff? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Yen. Councillor Gesselbrock, you've got a question?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to staff. I'm just curious on the height variance. There is the elementary school behind there, I believe. I've got the location right, Pauline Hare School. Yeah. Was there any consultation or input from them? Like, is this, I know that the play area is like runs along that side, and then the class, I mean, is this going to obstruct sort of the usual view corridor that those students have had?
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrook's question, I can't say that it would impact, there was no direct consultation, and I can't say that it would impact the view corridor beyond the maximum permitted height. That wasn't an analysis that was done.
Okay, so we don't know if it's going to block. They never really provided any, like, would the school be notified about this development or anything like this?
Not directly, no.
Okay. I'm just not sure in relation. I know there's a big step up in elevation, and then the school's built on top of that. You don't know roughly how many stories up that is.
You're correct there. I mean, there is a significant change in grade between this site and the school site. I can't, relative to the classroom areas, I can't, or the outside play areas, I can't speak to what that is in detail, but there is a significant change in grade between the two. Keep in mind, if it helps to pull up the There is the height variance, but if you pull up the attachment showing the, done with it here, sorry, the landscape plan, which is attachment G, you can see that there's the building is stepped back, so there's a lane in between the building and the school, and as well the building is stepped back with the amenity space and some additional space between the lane and the building. So it's not there's quite a bit of space between the building and the school and the play area.
Okay, thank you.
Horizontally, vertically, I can't tell you. I can't speak with any clarity on what that relationship is.
Yeah, this I wasn't able to distinguish that, but I do believe that it would go up quite substantially. What I'm just curious if the variance kind of pushes it above what could previously be seen or not. I mean, 5 stories might already be well above. I guess, yeah, just given it is a pretty substantial change from what there was before, and there is a variance asked. I'd hope maybe the elementary school was notified for input, because it can have a difference on experience in the playground and just general for the school. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to go to Councillor Turley next, and then Councillor Bonner. Councillor Turley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a former student of Pauline Hara and children who went there, I can guarantee to Councillor Kesselbrock that the last thing kids in a playground are looking at is the view. I don't even know what they look like. We were focused on running, jumping, playing, doing what kids do. So, and I recall that rock wall that went down to the lane was probably, it seemed enormous to me because I kept my distance from it, but it probably was 20 feet anyway. And then, of course, there is a playground down at Comox Park where the majority of us actually went down to play in. And, of course, the soccer field at Comox Park as well. So I'm not convinced that's going to be an issue for most children there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. You've inspired Councillor Gesselbrock, but Councillor Bonner gets the next word.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure Councillor Turley did all those great things when he was a kid back in the Stone Age, but many children today are much more sophisticated. But my question is actually attachment F and G. And I know this is just me being nitpicky, and I know this isn't the final design, but I'm looking at a bike lane that drives straight into a curb. And then if you can get over the curb, go straight into a crosswalk. So it's not going to look like that when it's done, is it?
Thank you through your worship to Councillor Bonner's question. So yeah, that's a good observation, and there is another Schedule D that indicates that the design of the off-street improvements are to be determined through detailed design. So that takes place at building permit stage. So this is just representative, obviously. Would not result in great cycling experience if it were built the way it's demonstrated there. So the most important thing here that we're considering is the design of the building relative to the design guidelines.
And just out of curiosity, do we have any idea when that permit development, the permit actually, building permit might come to us, or would that be a question for our past delegation?
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship, again, that would be a question to the delegation.
Have they given any indication?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
But the development permit would be valid if approved for a period of 2 years. They'd have that time to submit a building permit application.
Back to Councillor Gesselbrock. I hope it's not going to be a schoolyard fight between you and Councillor Turley tonight.
I was just saying I was there a lot more recently, and I think it would have an impact.
Not seeing any more questions, would someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion on the motion for issues of the development permit? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important to get multifamily housing down there. I really appreciate the larger units with the more bedrooms in it. I'm not a big fan of the height variations. I think 6 feet or 6 stories is just pushing it a little bit too much. And I think 4, 5 max is the best. And I think that the school, does need to be consulted on these things, and so that they can weigh in. And so I unfortunately can't support this as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions or discussion. All those in favor? Any contrary? Councillor Gesselbrock. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the official community plan amendment application number OCP 91 Sandstone Master Plan. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. I am going to ask Mr. Holm just to briefly introduce this. You have a presentation from the applicants this evening, which is fairly comprehensive, as well as some delegations. So we'll certainly be available to answer questions, but we'll leave the details to the presentation from the applicant.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is obviously a significant application for the city. The lands comprising the application are shown on the overhead there, known as the Sandstone Lands. The application is Keycorp Consulting Limited on behalf of Seacliff Properties Limited, the owner, Seacliff Properties Limited. And the application is to replace the existing Sandstone Master Plan, which was adopted in 2009, with a new master plan for those lands that would guide the long-term development of the subject properties. The lands are significant in area. I think the applicant will go into more detail about the proposal, as Mr. Lindsay referenced, but significant lands comprising 294 hectares, and the single largest undeveloped holding of property in Nanaimo. It spans, as you can see on the overhead, I'm not sure if you can make out the detail, but it spans the Trans-Canada Highway both on the west and east side of the Trans-Canada Highway. It spans the north and south side of the Duke Point Highway. It also spans Cedar Road to the Nanaimo River Estuary. So significant lands already under master plan approved in 2009. The proposed master plan would continue to provide direction on the long-term development of the lands, with some revisions looking, I'll just highlight some of the specific differences. So it provides an alternative mix and distribution of land uses that are responding to market demand. It includes less prescriptive land use policies to increase flexibility to allow response to market conditions going forward. And one of the significant items is an amendment to the transportation network plan for the property, the removal of the Highway 1 overpass from the concept transportation network that was included with the 2009 plan, and the re-examination of the transportation network necessary to service the proposed development is undertaken with consideration and recognition to the relationship between land use and transportation demand, and I think the applicant will speak more to that. As far as the relevance to the official community plan, I'll just touch on that briefly. The master plan as proposed would achieve a number of official community plan objectives, including maintaining a strong protection for environmentally sensitive habitat, would provide for significant parks and open space well in excess of the minimum legislative requirement through development, would encourage a mix of housing form, including ground-oriented single-family as well as multifamily form, would support employment opportunities with a mix of industrial and commercial land, as well as employment through the development of the lands going forward for many years. Would also reinforce and establish commercial centers within the city, while providing commercial services to support the day-to-day needs in the surrounding neighborhood. I'll be happy to take questions later, but I think the applicant can will be providing much more detailed overview of the proposal. In summary, though, staff support the application as proposed, and happy to take questions following the applicant's presentation. That's council's desire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a presentation from Georgia Desjardins, Senior Asset Manager, Seacliff Properties, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, you will correct me, please. Tanisha Avertzi, Manager of Planning, KeyCorp Consulting. Good evening to you both. I hope you can see us and we can see you, and we see the Sandstone Master Plan up on the screen. So if we get to hear you, I think we're good to go.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, excellent. So good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Georgia Desjardins. I'm the Senior Asset Manager at Seacliff Properties, the owner of the Sandstone Lands, and I have the great pleasure in overseeing this amazing project. I know I speak on behalf of Seacliff and the entire project team when I share how excited we are to present the 2021 update of the Sandstone Master Plan this evening. I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to city staff who we worked very closely with to bring this plan before you this evening. Before myself and my colleague Tanisha Evertz, our planning consultant with KeyCorp Consulting, go through our presentation, I also want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation. This is, as you may know, a very major project located in the city of Nanaimo, thanks to the past efforts of the Nanaimo First Nation. And I'd like to personally thank Chief Wise and his council for working closely with Seacliff over the last 3 years to bring the reimagining of this plan back before council. Of course, we are also available and look forward to answering any questions you may have at the end. Next slide, please. So before jumping in, I did also just want to introduce Seacliff Properties for those who may not be as familiar with us. We are a Vancouver-based privately owned real estate development company with more than 30 years experience in the successful development and management of large-scale real estate projects throughout Western Canada. As you can see from the image before you, we are also huge believers in the future of Vancouver Island, with 5 major projects currently underway at various stages of development. Next slide, please. Now onto the Sandstone Lands specifically. Seacliff purchased the Sandstone Lands in November of 2018 and submitted an application in May of 2019. The Sandstone Lands are 294 hectares or 726 acres in size, located in the southernmost boundary of the city of Nanaimo at the junction of the Trans-Canada Highway and Duke Point Highways. The site's unique qualities and location influence the character of development and are defined by its access, visibility, size, diverse development opportunities, and natural features. Combined, these unique qualities create the basis to develop a new gateway to the Mid-Island, forging important links with the city, region, Nanaimo's airport, and Duke Point Ferry Terminal. Next slide, please. But this project has a far longer history than this, with development of the site being contemplated and various iterations of the plan being presented to you for well over a decade now. The plan being presented to you this evening is a result of a huge amount of work and input received from a variety of different sources and engagement, and of course influenced by financial, environmental, and development landscape changes over time. The purpose of this plan is to establish the long-term vision and planning framework for the creation of a successful, comprehensively planned development in Nanaimo's south end that can respond, adapt, and evolve to rapidly changing market conditions and technological innovations. It describes key components, including land use designations and densities, transportation, parks and open spaces, sustainability, infrastructure, and urban design policies, with the intent being to act as a guide to shape future growth and manage change, providing direction for the subsequent land use, subdivisions, and development approvals for the Sandstone Lands. We are delighted to be at this place of presenting the master plan to you this evening, and of course, to continue moving this in addition to a corresponding rezoning of the lands forward, so we can finally make this long-awaited vision for this project a reality. A quick overview of some of the key aspects of the master plan before you. So Sandstone is intended to become a comprehensively planned yet diverse community that offers a wide range of land uses, from industrial to commercial to residential in different forms. It has a strong economic focus and provision of substantial industrial lands. It will provide for the development of a neighborhood center that will provide a more urban experience, offering a mix of multifamily residential and commercial retail opportunities. and also provides for 2 new residential neighborhoods. The plan contemplates 121 hectares or nearly 300 acres of parks and open space and trails, and also comes with land dedications for elementary school and community center sites. We are also factoring in tens of millions of dollars in offsite road and servicing improvements to bring to the south end of Nanaimo, and as well as a land transfer and development potential with the Nanaimo First Nation. Next slide, please. Now, the Sandstone Lands are currently guided in the OCP by the 2009 master plan. The 2009 plan on the left, as you can see, had a heavy emphasis on creating a large-scale, more regional commercial urban node in the south end, along with industrial and residential growth in a variety of different forms. As you can see here on the right of your screen, the new plan has a focus on economic development and employment, with the focus and emphasis of Sandstone now on providing for more industrial growth, though still offering more of a local, neighborhood-sized commercial center to ensure that we are bringing the much-needed commercial and retail opportunities to serve the south end. Next slide, please. Now, I won't go through this all in detail, but just quickly, you can see overall, we're looking at an overall decrease of 200 units of residential when compared to the 2009 plan, provision of a neighborhood commercial center as opposed to more of a regional commercial center and city commercial center, and an increase in industrial uses. Again, the clear difference for 2021 is a shift in providing for more of an emphasis on industrial growth. This is driven by a number of factors, including the Reimagine Nanaimo process, which is of course still in process, and in response to the City of Nanaimo's land use and inventory analysis that was completed by Colliers, which outlined a clear need for more industrial lands, without which new businesses may have to locate elsewhere, and existing businesses may be limited in their ability to expand or be forced to relocate due to rising costs and limited capacity. The land inventory analysis demonstrated that industrial lands currently under construction and vacant lots over 2 hectares only represent enough supply to last until 2023 in the high growth scenario. The recommendations were clear that the usable vacant industrial zoned land is insufficient to satisfy demand projections even under the status quo scenario, and it is imperative that the city examine potential solutions to create new industrial supply. Lastly, I think it's important to note that after continuing to work closely with the Nanaimo First Nation, the Cedar Road neighborhood precinct of the 2021 plan is subject to a mutual benefit agreement between Seacliff and the Nanaimo First Nation to transfer and return a former village site south of the Nanaimo River estuary, while also considering the potential transfer of other development lands in this precinct to Nanaimo to increase their land base and develop much needed housing in the future. If fully executed on, this agreement could see all 264 acres of this precinct transferred to Nanaimo. Now I'm going to pass the presentation over to my colleague Tanisha for the specifics about land use, parks, and open spaces and transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thanks, Georgia, and good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'll jump right in. The Sandstone Lands have been grouped into sub-areas called precincts. The precincts have been envisioned to respond to site conditions, the proposed uses, the transportation networks, and parks and open space opportunities within Sandstone. Our vision is for each precinct to connect to the surrounding areas as seamlessly as possible because we know some portions of Sandstone, Cinnabar in particular, are going to be standalone areas that need to tie into the existing neighborhoods and surrounding land uses. The development within each precinct will be based on more detailed evaluation of the site constraints and the infrastructure capacity at the zoning approval. To go through the precincts, first up is employment and business in purple. The economic and business focus for Sandstone and the surrounding areas, it's located south of Cedar Road and to the north and south of Duke Point Highway. This precinct includes substantial industrial opportunities. The vision is for the new light industrial lands in particular to be a smaller scale business park or incubator and technology-focused area with some ancillary commercial and office. The Cedar Road neighborhood precinct is in yellow with a 1, a single family and attached housing neighborhood located north of Cedar Road. Cedar Road is the focus for transportation and infrastructure improvements for this precinct. The Cinnabar Valley neighborhood precinct, the lower left with a 6, is a single family and attached housing extension of the existing Cinnabar Valley neighborhood. It includes the proposed school site and the formalization of popular parks and trails in the area. Extension Road is a focus of transportation improvements for this precinct. Finally, the Fielding Precinct in red, a mixed-use neighborhood scale center that includes a commercial high street, public art and plaza spaces, a community center site, a potential transit hub, and some standalone medium density and attached multifamily residential. Next slide, please. So let's touch on the individual precincts in more detail. First is the Employment and Business Precinct, an expansive area that is envisioned as the economic and employment hub and will support a wide range of employment activities. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the intent for the light industrial within Sandstone with examples from Tintown and Courtney, Lee Road and Langford, and from right here in Nanaimo. Incorporating small retail businesses, some ancillary office and residential in smaller scale buildings and lots will create a dynamic light industrial concentration with easy access to the surrounding precincts and region. Next slide, please. This slide is showing some precedents and examples of larger format industrial buildings. In the industrial areas, there will be a range of industrial uses. Those areas are currently zoned for industrial uses and are directly adjacent to other industrial lands. Next slide, please. The neighborhoods within Sandstone contemplate single and two-family development and attached housing for the residential typologies. These areas will see roughly half of each precinct dedicated as parks and trails space, and the Cinnabar Valley Neighborhood Precinct has lands for an elementary school site earmarked. The goal for these neighborhoods is for the development to mesh with the existing land use patterns. In addition, these precincts have policies supporting future local service centers. Next slide, please. The Fielding Precinct is the mixed-use neighborhood center of Sandstone. Within this area, there's roughly 4 times the Chase River Country Grocer in commercial square footage proposed. Next slide, please. The Fielding Precinct will be pedestrian scale with urban parks and plazas and a focus on multimodal infrastructure. We envision it as the heart of Sandstone, providing services and community amenities to the employment and business lands in the surrounding neighborhoods. The community center lands contemplated would allow for buildings similar to Oliver Woods in size. Of course, these amenity lands and other community amenities will be negotiated at zoning. Next slide, please. At the outset, transportation and traffic improvements have been a top priority in our process to date, as Sandstone has always been contemplated as an area with increased scale and density. An immense effort for the last 2 years has been put forward to put this proposed scope of work by city staff and our consulting team in collaboration with the Cinnabar Valley Neighborhood Association. I'll do a quick breakdown of each of the proposed mitigations, starting in the north. So A, C, and H are the contemplated highway corridor improvements and include intersection upgrades at 10th and Mackey, Cranberry Avenue, Cedar Road, and the Trans-Canada to allow for more capacity and improve the safety of each intersection. D indicates the Cranberry Connector project, one of the redundancy options contemplated for capacity improvements, network completion, and as a multimodal linkage. E and F are the Parkway and Extension Road bookends of the redundancy option proposed at McEwen Way. G is the new connector road proposed to connect the Cinnabar Valley Neighborhood Precinct to Extension Road. The precinct will also connect at Roberta Road East and at Healy Road. Moving to the east of the Trans-Canada, we have B, which is the Fielding Connector proposed for enhanced capacity, redundancy, and network completion. I is a new intersection at Cedar Road and the proposed Sandstone Boulevard to access the Fielding Precinct and the Employment and Business Precinct. J, K, and L are each new intersections or intersection upgrades along Cedar Road. This also sees Cedar Road itself being upgraded from the highway to the start of the Nanaimo First Nation Reserve. Finally, M, which is the improvements at the Duke Point Highway connection. Each of the proposed mitigations and improvements are high level as we are at the OCP stage, and a detailed analysis of each will happen at the zoning approval, where the scope of work will be finalized. We understand that the community wants action and are committed to working with staff to be shovel ready on priority projects as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Sandstone will provide approximately 121 hectares of parks and open spaces throughout the precincts. These range from wetlands and natural spaces that require habitat protection to city parks and plazas in the more urban areas. The proposed community center land is located in the Fielding Precinct. Community center site is also where any new future transit hub could locate and is adjacent to the Fielding multi-use trail, which is the multimodal spine of Sandstone linking the Fielding and Employment and Business precincts. The proposed 5-acre school site is located in the Cinnabar Valley on the western side of the Cinnabar Valley Precinct, adjacent to Elaine Hamilton Park. Next slide, please. Finally, the development of the Sandstone Lands will be wrapped in layers of economic, social, and ecologically sustainable principles. Not only will the buildings and developments within Sandstone strive for a high level of sustainability and resilience, but the proposed makeup of land uses and the opportunities those create will help Sandstone contribute to the health, empowerment, and connectivity of Nanaimo as a whole. Back to Georgia for our conclusion, and thank you for dealing with my adult braces first ever presentation.
Thank you, Tanisha. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to circle back on some of the key points we've covered off here. So the Sandstone Master Plan has been shaped and influenced by a number of important factors, from stakeholder engagement, the Reimagine Nanaimo process, and in response to the city's land use inventory analysis. This update to the master plan is required to update, align, and modernize the Sandstone Plan accordingly. We are proposing to provide a comprehensively planned yet diverse community that offers a wide range of land uses with a strong economic focus and provision of substantial industrial lands, development of a new neighborhood commercial core to provide the residents of South Nanaimo with much needed commercial and retail opportunities, 2 new residential neighborhoods, and Nanaimo First Nation with reconciliation and development land opportunities. Additionally, we are proposing the preservation and dedication of significant new parks and open spaces, amenity lands for a new elementary school and a recreation center, and a substantial investment in off-site road and servicing improvements. Sandstone has been a very, very long talked about and awaited project, and we are committed to making it a reality. While this, in combination with the zoning, is just getting us to the starting line, it is a very critical step, and we look forward to working collaboratively with yourselves and city staff to continue moving forward. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to present the Sandstone Master Plan this evening. A lot of work and consideration has gone into this, and we really look forward to next steps and working together to make this a reality.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock, is your question for the presentation presenters or for staff? Sorry, thank you. Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. My question is, there's 2 questions actually. You said that land has been set aside for School District 68. Is that set aside or is that given to them?
The land that will be set aside is to be given, so land transfer as a community amenity at the zoning stage. We anticipate that to be contemplated in the master development agreement.
And would that be the same also with the community center?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegations. I appreciate your presentation tonight. Over the years, I've seen a number of iterations of the Sandstone project, and although I still, of course, want to hear from the community, and there's a lot of steps to be taken, I'll tell you honestly, this is the first time I sort of feel confident that there is something here that we can work with, and I'm fairly excited about it. My questions are twofold. You've identified 6 development areas in the proposal, and assuming for a moment that this project does move ahead, and that might be a huge assumption, but let's assume it does. I'm assuming that there would be phased development because it is such a huge project. Have you identified the order of the phases? Would they be number 1 through 6, or has that been looked at yet?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Thorpe, through your worship. We have not gone into detailed phasing plans at this point in time, just given the sort of high level that we're still working with at the OCP stage. However, we would see it as likely being driven by a combination of factors from servicing and transportation influences and also market demands that would influence the actual phasing of when we get shovels in the ground.
Thank you, fair enough. I personally like initially the balance of commercial, industrial, and residential, and certainly I like the cooperation that I believe you've shown in working with the neighborhood and with SFN, which is important. My second question is, I think what I have heard, what council has heard, the main concerns of the Chase River Cinnabar neighborhood is to do with transportation. And I noticed in our staff report, it says that under your revised projected project, that you would re-examine the transportation network necessary to service the proposed development in recognition of the relationship between land use and transportation demands. Do I take that to mean that Seacliff or Sandstone would be an active partner in the city in looking at the transportation options that you identified on one of your slides?
Go ahead, Georgia.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Councillor Thorpe, through your worship. Yes, absolutely. Transportation has been an enormous emphasis of our time and study spent to date. And we've continued to work closely with our consulting team, city staff, as well as the local neighborhood to understand, you know, the prioritization, the sense of urgency, the need for action to be taken here to really start bringing some of those transportation improvement projects to the south end. And we would absolutely see ourselves as sort of a critical partner in bringing some of those projects to realization.
Thank you. It has become, I think, top of mind with council regarding this project, so I'm pleased to hear that. And I, as I said, look forward to hearing from our other delegations, and we'll see where the evening takes us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Are there any other questions for the presenters before we move on to the three delegations? I'm not seeing Councillor Bonner. Sorry.
Thank you, Worship, and through the delegation. Just a couple of quick comments. You've added the option of heavy industrial, and I'm wondering why. And I can only imagine one would want that if they had already lined up a heavy industrial user. Can you explain why you moved to that?
Tanisha. Oh, have we lost Tanisha?
She looks a bit frozen, I'm afraid.
She does. I know she was having some IT issues. I might just give her 1 second to try to refresh, and otherwise I'm happy to. Well, through your worship to Councillor Bonner, maybe I'll just start while Tanisha sorts out her IT issues here. But so currently parcels 2 and 3 are zoned for I4, which is the industrial zone that provides for heavy industrial development that's not compatible with residential uses. So we, when comparing back to the 09 plan, are switching from the light industrial designation there to industrial, which really provides for just a larger range of industrial uses. The light industrial designation really provides a lot of policy around smaller lots. It has more stringent policies around what it can be in the ancillary uses that can be permitted there as well. Whereas industrial is, again, a more flexible designation that provides for some larger format uses. Given the location of Sandstone at this critical juncture point at the Duke Point Highway and Trans-Canada Highway, we felt it was important to provide land use designations that can accommodate both different types. Both different types of land uses are badly in need. No, we do not have, users lined up ready to go, just again, given where we're at in this process, but we certainly see that there is a significant need for both types of land users going forward.
And if I'm kind of going to go back to a question asked earlier in terms of the timing of this thing. It's quite easy to build residential and mid density, and generally a little bit more harder to make industrial stuff. Do you see, as the development of this project going forward, that we're going to see a fair amount of the residential built before the industrial, or would it be roughly both of them at the same time?
I mean, again, I don't want to imply that we've done detailed phasing analysis, because we haven't. We're trying to just stay in line with where we are at in the development approvals process right now. But I can assure you that there is a significant interest from our perspective in moving forward in the industrial development. And I see a huge amount of opportunity in the industrial development landscape right now as well. So I would see, certainly potentially progressing on that basis, or concurrently with residential, or, there's a huge amount of factors that will go into that. But yes, I do see a lot of opportunity on the industrial front.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following on Councillor Bonner's question, I'm curious, the Rollo report that Council received in July 2020, how did that influence your planning, if at all? This is the land analysis.
Sorry, are you referring to the Collier's land use inventory analysis?
Yes, I am.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, yes, that had played a significant role in our re-envisioning of the Sandstone Master Plan. It was pretty clear in identifying what areas the city was requiring additional land use opportunities, with industrial being the very clear focus. It did identify, I believe, offhand, that there was adequate commercial zoned lands within the city of Nanaimo. However, we did feel it was critically important to the success of the community to still retain some commercial density in the Fielding precinct in order to bring those much needed commercial and retail opportunities to the south end of Nanaimo. And then, as you can see, we kept the residential relatively consistent from the 09 plan to the 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions for the presenters, so I would to thank you for taking your time tonight to present to Council. We do have delegations, and the first is Bill Yoakum in place of Chief Wise. Is Councillor Yoakum from Nanaimo First Nation online?
Yes, we're just getting him here, Your Worship. Just one moment. I believe he should be there now, Your Worship, if you want to see if he can hear us and is ready to go.
Councillor Yoakum, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Excellent, thank you. If you're ready to go, I think you know the drill, 5 minutes. After 4 minutes, I will interrupt you and tell you you've got a minute left.
All right.
So if you're ready to go, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm a little, just speaking on behalf of Chief Wise and Nanaimo First Nation, as Chief Wise sends his regrets as he's dealing with what everyone in BC is dealing with, crisis and emergencies. In this case, it's Rains Road and numerous houses for our members. So Chief's doing what chiefs and leaders do in this time. So sends his regrets, and in the 11th hour, you guys were stuck with me. So sorry for you guys. Anyways, holy you guys, I forgot how long those meetings are. I was sitting waiting for 2 hours. But anyways, thank you for your time. I don't have much to add, Your Worship and Council, except as we shared our position at our council to council the other evening and support the project, and are really confident that if there's gaps that the developer and the owner and the city will work through that type of the issues that may be there, traffic, etc. And just wanted to share again in part of reconciliation. I know it's an overused word quite a bit. In this case, we really value the opportunity to expand our land base, as you guys are well aware. I don't mean to be preachy here, but for those that may not be aware, is the smallest land capital in Canada per nation for population, as we're drastically to expand our land. And so when this goes through, and hopefully it goes through, is the owners are going to be gifting Nanaimo a large chunk of parcels of land, and will benefit our peoples for generation to come through housing, of fee simple lands, tax bases, etc., for the betterment of our people, also the region at large, and start being involved in our communities. And so, yeah, I don't want to go on rambling because it's late and you guys have a long night. I just want to share how important it is for us in Nanaimo, and we look forward to working to see other initiatives as well. But this is the initiative on subject tonight. but we look forward to continuing our relationship in a positive manner, which I believe it's on, and it's quite evidence on that pathway, Your Worship. And if there's any questions that any of yourself or any when we have, I can do my best to answer on behalf of Nanaimo, but I have the liberties to, with Chief Wise's permission and team. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Yocum. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you to Councillor Yocum. I understand, or I'm just wondering, have you been in discussion with Chase River to hear their concerns, and have you been able to adapt with that?
I haven't personally myself, but I've heard Chief Wise on call with Mr. Parker. I believe that's the Chase River, I don't know his official title. And Mr. Parker's been in that role. I'm back numerous years ago, and I used to be involved years ago in that capacity, and also in other initiatives. So Chief Wise has had conversations with Mr. Parker, and Mr. Parker, I believe, and Chief Wise have had conversations and believe they understand where Nanaimo's position is, but also we respect Mr. Parker and the group he represents position and support as well. I believe, you may know Councillor Armstrong more than myself, but it sounds like there's Chief Wise and Mr. Parker are standing shoulder to shoulder on this subject.
Thank you, Councillor Yocum.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. I'm not seeing any other questions for this particular delegation. Thank you, Councillor Yocum, for attending tonight.
All right, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. And the next delegation is Dale Porter. Mr. Porter, I think you're familiar with the drill. If you can introduce yourself when you get to the mic, and you'll have 5 minutes. And when we get to 4, if you're still talking, I'll let you know you have a minute left. Appreciate you coming tonight.
I'm going to make this as quick as I can. I only have 3 points I want to cover off. 1, jobs. We've lost a lot in this area due to the forest industry basically shutting down. The only big employment that seems to be in line with that is Harmac, but we all know that that's an old plant, and I don't think anybody suggests they're going to build a new pulp mill anywhere. Jobs we need badly. Secondly, with the lead into this program, where we're at with our transportation issues we have in the area, I think this would be an excellent time to take less than baby steps, take some big ones, and have transit up and running to service this project from the start. If you don't know how to get to your work in your car, you'll take a bus, and you'll do that all the time. Switching back is going to be tougher. Due to the dampness we've had recently, apparently the weather is causing issues. We need to change that somehow. With this being a new build, I think it'd be a great time to try out all the new technology while building, not retrofitting, not spending a lot of extra money, but build from day one with energy, conserving plans, materials in the building to start with. Use the sun for heat, get the drainage, use the proper lighting instead of retrofitting. We've heard businesses are having problems today. They need to switch, money's tight, so start off from day one with all the proper materials. 100 years from now, they'll think we're dinosaurs, but that's their problem. But I think with this project and the people building it with their track record, I see no reason why it can't come off as necessary to be a help to this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Porter. Are there any questions for Mr. Porter? I see none. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And the final delegation is Mike Parker, the Chase River Community Association. Mr. Parker, I think it's fair to say you're very familiar with the process, so. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. The Chase River Community Association has appreciated the work done by Seacliff Properties, the Sandstone Project team, and the city staff for bringing this amendment to Council tonight. Our association supports this application, and we strongly urge Council to move forward to a public hearing. We are concerned about the changes made in this application that offer a radical difference from the city-accepted Sandstone Master Plan from 2009. With the passing of this OCP amendment, we look forward to meeting soon with both the Sandstone project team and city staff to change some of the actual land uses back to the 2009 plan. We are requesting that council commit to supporting these changes and give us our promised southern gateway to our city. As outlined in the 2009 master plan, we want an urban node for South Nanaimo, which has the focus and character of a regional commercial center characterized by intensive retail and services uses, as well as a higher density residential and light industrial uses. The residents of our area no longer want to get into their vehicles to drive 20 kilometers to Woodgrove area to access the many stores and other services of our city. We want the same level of services in our area. We realize that this application brings forward minimal changes to the 2009 master plan with regards to residential housing options for Cinnabar Valley. These options and the allocation of significant green space will help maintain the rural-like setting that the residents cherish and the reason why many moved here in the first place. We are very pleased that Seedcliff, with their project team, has made a variety of suggestions to try and fix some of the ongoing traffic issues that impact the residents daily. We identified this as the number one priority need when we met with them 3 years ago. The issue of traffic flow has been years in the making and needs to be fixed now. We desperately need a secondary exit from the valley, and accessing either the Parkway or the Trans-Canada Highway presents a host of other challenges. The residents have repeatedly voiced their concerns that with only one usable exit, there are significant safety concerns that need to be addressed immediately. The potential for a traffic nightmare is not something our community is prepared to handle. Should we have an interface fire, an earthquake, or similar catastrophic event? We want to continue our collaboration with Sandstone project team, the Ministry of Transportation, Highways and Infrastructure, the City of Nanaimo staff to address the traffic issues in a timely manner. This may also include the RDN staff and private landholders, as well as some of the out-of-the-box thinking will likely be required to resolve the mess we have right now. I'm hopeful that a variety of potential options to address traffic issues can be presented to the residents within the next 6 to 12 months. In closing, please consider the items I have raised tonight and in the past. The residents of South Nanaimo deserve to have the same services and a safety net that the rest of the city already have in their areas. Please approve the OCP amendment and then direct staff to move quickly through the rezoning process so we can finally get shovels in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I attended all 4 of those meetings, as I'm sure you're aware. One of the concerns that keeps coming up, and you touched on it, is the traffic. And if we can't resolve that issue, would your neighborhood association still be in favor of the expansion into Cinnabar area? I'm talking the west side of the highway.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, and I understand you have been in conversations with Chief Wise, and you guys are in agreement with this moving forward?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'm not wishing to split up the discussion on this in the circumstances. Are there any further questions for the delegation or staff? All right.
For staff.
Councillor Gesselbrock or
No,
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I have a question for staff.
Go ahead, please. Then Councillor Gesselbrock.
And I think it probably would be directed to Mr. Rosen or Mr. Sims. We've heard that one of the issues with the traffic planning is that we're not sure about the zoning. If this does get rezoned, would you then be in a better position to deal with the issues affecting Sandstone? And would their involvement offset some of the costs that the city would be looking at?
Thanks, Your Worship. To Councillor Armstrong, just at this point, as was presented by Key Corp, we're going into an OCP amendment. So this provides the general guidance. As we work through the rezoning, we'll be able to analyze each of the suggestions, as well as other potential possibilities for resolving the traffic issues. And I think this is partly, supports the provision of a mobility study in the area as well, to provide the entire picture.
Thank you.
Councillor Gisselbrook.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to staff. I'm honestly a little confused in the sense of the timing of this OCP amendment. I was under the impression that we stopped any changes to the OCP till after the Reimagine process. And I guess as we're looking at the city as a whole and trying to figure out, what we're trying to achieve, that something like this would occur after. Yeah, I'm a little confused. Thank you.
Mr. Holm.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Gesselbrick's question. I'll give it a try, and Mr. Lindsay will jump in if I'm off base. But this application was in play prior to Council's direction to no longer, receive new rounds of official community amendment applications, which, we've provided advice we'd have to consider in any event if one were made. But this application was in play at the time prior to Council's direction to not receive additional official community amendment applications. As well, it's being considered through the Reimagine process and will inform potentially the outcome for that area. It's an existing master planned area. This is an update that we're coordinating with the review of Reimagine. The applicant's been engaged in Reimagine as well, receiving information and providing input. And this application, if approved as proposed, would inform the future land use direction through the OCP, the new OCP going forward. We've also contemplated, and Mr. Lindsay can probably speak better to this, but at the moment, if you look at the scenarios that we've put forward, they actually identify for consideration still the final scenario has yet to be determined. Council is going to provide some input on that coming up soon. But the land use scenarios that were developed had status quo, which is the existing Sandstone master plan for the area, the urban node for the area, as well as the existing land uses identified in the Sandstone master plan. Scenario 2 and 3 identified potential alternatives, which considered the input that we're receiving through this application.
Great, thank you. I've got a few more questions, but I can loop back after the first round.
Thank you. In order, Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Turley.
I'll let Councillor Turley go first, Your Worship.
Councillor Thorpe is conceding to you, Councillor Turley, a deference to seniority, I think.
Absolutely.
Take them off.
I was going to say you've got the screen.
Yeah, I know. I may have seniority, but my technical knowledge is abysmal. Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. So my comment, and I don't know if staff can provide any insight into this, is that my understanding of the regional node is a larger commercial development, i.e. big box stores, that type of retail outlets. And quite frankly, when I looked at this, even the past go around, I looked at it and I think, I'd be totally shocked if the likes of Costco or Superstore or any of the big box stores would even consider putting a business in that area, because virtually it's surrounded by rural lands, which of course we all know is very low density, i.e. not much population, which of course means no close by customers, with the exception of the slightly northwest area. So I don't know if that is a consideration that was given to rethinking that part of it or not. And I don't know who I would ask that question of, but probably the proponents. The other thing I understand, and reading the notes, is that industrial is already zoned in that area. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Holm is nodding, yes.
I saw that. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, it's all yours.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Having heard the delegations and the information presented tonight, I would certainly like to see this move to public hearing. I'm prepared to make the recommendations unless you'd prefer the acting mayor to do so.
No. I think she's deferring to you, another deferral to seniority tonight. We're so gracious here.
Then let's get it on the floor officially. So I will move first that the official community plan amendment bylaw 2021 number 6500.044 to replace Schedule B Sandstone Master Plan in Schedule C Chase River Neighborhood Plan of the official community plan bylaw 2008 number 6500 pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. It is first reading. Any discussion? No, not appropriate. So all those in favor and any contrary? Seeing none, first reading passes. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that official community plan amendment bylaw 2021 number 6500.044 pass second reading.
We have a seconder in Councillor Hemmons, and now we have some discussion. Councillor Thorpe, do you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, Your Worship, as I said, we've heard from the delegations. I've heard Nanaimo's position. I've heard that the community association is very eager to see this take the next step. And so I think based on those facts especially, I'm very comfortable with seeing this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Bonner, Gesselbrock, and Armstrong. Councillor Bonner. Thank
you, Worship. I'm also in favor of seeing this move forward. I do have a question for staff, though. And I'm in favor of this moving forward to public hearing. And I don't want to belittle the concerns of the members of the Cinnabar Valley, but it's twice now we've heard the issue of an interface fire, which I'm guessing would be a forest fire, probably coming from the south end, which cuts off one exit out of the valley. Have we done any studies to figure out how many homes are in that area? And if, I'm assuming that in an emergency, the extension road becomes 2 lanes heading north. The lights are turned off. Traffic is routed so that everybody can get out of there fast enough. Have we done any studies on how long it would take to exit everyone out of the valley?
Your Worship, I can't, to Councillor Bonner's question, I think the valid points is exactly what we would do in an emergency plan, but to my knowledge, we haven't done any specific studies on that to estimate time.
Yeah, and the only reason I was thinking is changing or allowing more traffic out is fairly expensive. Is the question is it necessary for that reason alone? I know there's a number of other reasons that we're looking at transportation there. I was just curious about that one because I've heard it a couple of times now. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff. Just in terms of the timing, like doing this OCP amendment now in terms of speeding up the process, for example, of getting a secondary access for the Cinnabar Valley, will this enhance that, or will it make no difference?
Yeah, I'll try through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock's question. So it sets the stage, gives clarity on the land use designation, the future land use direction, and as I think the applicant referenced earlier, would lead to sort of clarity in the discussion on mitigation options through rezoning. There's been quite a bit of work that's been done on traffic impact assessment leading up to this, but ultimately and there's been mitigation options identified that we went through, that the applicant walked us through in sort of at a high level, but it would allow those to be explored further and vetted with clarity on the future land use direction for the area. So yes, it would advance the discussion and the analysis that are required through the rezoning to sort out what options are available to provide that redundancy and to address some of the transportation demand issues from the development and obviously some of the existing challenges in the area that you've heard about.
Okay, so, given that the Reimagine process would be wrapping up April-ish, it would be probably, this would give, 4 months or so, 3-4 months to kind of move it ahead. I guess I'm struggling just with the addition of the quantity of single-family dwellings now, before seeing the big picture of our whole official community plan, to see the development in context with all the other potential areas of development and those numbers. This does feel like it's just a little outpaced outside of a much larger process, and I'm a little uncomfortable going ahead with the public hearing based on that when there's a whole nother larger process that this is nested within. It's almost, for me, it's kind of like putting the cart a bit ahead of the horse. So,
Your Worship, I don't know if I'll answer Councillor Gesselbrecht's question or just provide some context, I think, here. And going back to the Collier's report that you've heard about this evening a few times already, that Collier's report was done based on assuming that these lands that are currently designated neighborhood under your official community plan would be developed out as low density. So the numbers we see in that plan anticipate these areas being developed. So we are, I don't want to say we're counting on them, but we are including them within our needs demand for housing in the community long term. That is one part of the context. The other thing I think it's important to recognize is we've been out to the community talking about scenarios, and there's been 3 scenarios put in front of the community right now. All of those scenarios show, so the existing OCP, both the existing OCP and the 2 alternative scenarios show the lands west of the highway, so the lands in Cedar Valley, and the lands north of Cedar as being, as shown here, as low to medium density residential. So all of the options that are currently been distributed, which we assume one of them will be picked to be the ultimate direction, include these lands being developed as generally shown in this proposal.
So just for clarity, so the single family dwelling residential areas are in both scenario 2 and both scenario 3 as is?
That is correct, yes.
And then this development, it reflects more scenario 2 or scenario 3? Like, I guess the differentiation between the fielding commercial and then the employment lands, how much different is that from a urban node, like in the scenario 1?
So, Your Worship, the 3 scenarios that we shared with the community, the first is status quo, which shows this as a regional shopping town center. And I'm sorry, I don't have them in front of me, but the next 2 scenarios show a portion, if not all, of the lands being converted to a business or employment center, including light industrial use. So I would say that the plan that you've received this evening it's a variation from option 1, which is the status quo, and it's much more closely aligned to options 2 and 3, which see not the regional center role here, but more of an employment center and a light industrial role.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief. I think there's some really interesting proposed amendments here, and I'm really curious to hear what the public has to say. We've heard some support tonight to go to public hearing, and I'm happy to vote in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think it needs to go to public hearing. I think it's really important that Nanaimo First Nation is in support of this, the neighborhood association's in support of this. We actually gain much more from this plan than we do from the original plan, in the fact that there's going to be a 5-acre school site. If we don't approve that, then that's out the window. The community center is out the window. So I think it's really important. I shouldn't say out the window, but it's not on the previous plan, whereas in this one it's there, and there's the commitment that they will do those 2. So I think that's really important. And I also think we're going to have problems, even if the development doesn't go, with the traffic issues, which I think are going to be addressed. I heard from our staff that once the zoning is looked at and they figured out that they're going to start working diligently to bring some options to council. To Councillor Bonner's point on the evacuation route, it wouldn't go down to one lane. It has to stay at two because you have to move emergency personnel in and out. So it is an issue, and the narrowness of the road is an issue for moving the big equipment in for if it's a fire. We've had issues in there in the past for emergency vehicles to get in and out when we've had smaller fires as well as accidents. I know the Neighborhood Association can attest to that. But for me, I think this is a very good plan, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
And Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Again, very much in support of this. Just a question process. We're doing our Reimagine Nanaimo, at which point we're looking at the entire city. We're about to make if this goes to third reading and does get passed, an OCP amendment. Does Reimagine then go back and change all that, or does it ignore that one and we just don't touch it anymore? How does that work?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think that's a very good question, and it's something that we'll have to adjust to as this project proceeds. Right now, the timeline we're on, so if this proceeds to get first and second reading this evening, it'll go to public hearing in January. Mm-hmm. So in all likelihood, the bylaw will still be in process when we go out to do phase 3 engagement and have a concept plan. If that's the case, what we would normally do in a situation like that is you would simply indicate in the draft plan that there's a study area that's under review by bylaw, and depending on council's decision on that bylaw, it would be incorporated into the plan, or if alternative direction was provided by council. But I think at this point, looking at how the timing's working for each, I think that's likely how we would proceed. But yes, it's something that we're aware of, and we'll have to balance depending on the outcomes and timing of this and phase 3 at launch. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just building off that. So essentially, we're maybe amending a bylaw that we're just going to replace anyways. So we'll amend an OCP that's just going to fundamentally be replaced with a new OCP. So I'm struggling with process as well, because I think there's a lot of anticipation around this particular decision. But if it's just I'm having trouble connecting the dots procedurally here.
Your Worship, I agree. Having an active OCP application, overall OCP review in process is not ideal when you have active applications, but we have this and others that we have in stream and have trying to then treat fairly and bring forward as they're ready. Unfortunately, the timing is going to make it somewhat difficult. I would say, yes, if you adopt this bylaw, it will amend the existing official community plan, but I think it will also give some direction and clarity around these lands going forward and how we would envision them in the new plan. So I don't think it's adopt it now and we're going to come back and ask you a whole new set of questions under the plan. This will very much inform how we move forward with these lands in the new OCP.
So if I may follow up then, Your Worship, and I guess that just begs the question for me then, why are we going through this process and not just contemplate it as part of the whole OCP? It's such a huge amendment that ultimately I just wonder why couldn't it just be pondered as part of the final Reimagine product?
Your Worship, I guess that's ultimately direction council could give. From staff's perspective, I know that the timing might not seem the best, but it's an active application that we've had and been working with, and the consultants have been making best efforts on with us for a very long time. So we didn't feel it was appropriate to hold up this application, especially with the efforts that were given to reflect upon the Collier's studies, the direction that we saw the master plan going in, the overall community plan going in, and the scenarios that were developed and shared with the community and how these were attempting to align with those scenarios. So for those reasons, we've elected to bring it forward now and not delay.
Okay, thanks. And if I just may add my comments here, I'm not going to get too much into the decision whether I'm favor or not. I believe the process can kind of be faulty, but ultimately we should try to retain open minds as we consider them. So I won't get too much into that. I will just say that I think sort of how this has come together, the manner in which it's been consulted with the community, has been kind of divisive and unnecessarily so. And what particularly bothers me about that is, I've witnessed and observed sometimes in open meetings, I think, unfair comments towards staff. The reason I say those unfair is because they'll fundamentally always be one way, right? When you attack professionals like that. So just moving forward, I think it's important that for the best interest of Nanaimo as a whole, the impacted communities, Nanaimo obviously with the stated interest tonight, that everybody has access to complete, accurate, and honest information. And I believe the proponent really plays a fundamental role in helping us frame this, getting us all that information so we can evaluate this and what's best for the community and what's ultimately best for the people that live here. So I will vote to proceed in second reading, but I just wanted to share those concerns about some of the process of how I've seen this unfold. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I am going to vote in support of moving this forward, firstly because as a general practice, I believe that matters should go to public hearing unless they are so completely out of touch with community needs or local desire or the consideration of the future of this city and existing plans and how this city has developed. Generally speaking, it is going to get my support. This one in particular, I want to see move forward because we have had what is often an unusual presentation in terms of support from Sinixic First Nation and from the Neighbourhood Association and others. Some of the criticism, as Councillor Brown has pointed out, has been unfair in its base and particularly unfair to staff with some of the suggestions. But this part of our city has been anticipating or expecting something to happen here for a very long time. The general proposal, and I'm conscious of the fact that proposals don't often go ahead. We have voted in favor of various other projects, if you will, in this community, and they have yet to come to fruition, and the 2 years have passed, and sometimes they're coming back to us and asking for an extension or a renewal, rather. But in the circumstances, this one should be at public hearing. So I'm going to support it, and I'm not seeing any other speakers. So all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. I am in council's hands. It is 12 minutes to 10. I assume people would like a bit of a break. So if we can reconvene at 10 o'clock, if nothing else, just to stretch our legs in the interim. I wasn't going to mention powdering noises, Councillor Armstrong.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So what we did is we've replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, Complete the lighting request form and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh. Go, 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 go! Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other 2 arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
Welcome to the city's South Fork Water Treatment Plant. This is where we take water that we would collect in our lakes and rivers, pipe it, we filter it and treat it before we send it off to the city's distribution system in your taps. This facility actually does a better job than most home filtration systems. The water that comes into your home that you use every day, that you bathe in every day, that you wash your clothes in every day, is cleaner than anything you can get anywhere.
Here you see filtration in action. It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's nothing to really see. But if you look in the tank, you'll see the froth on the top. That's dissolved organic matter, and when we aerate the tank, that froths up, and that's why that's up there.
We take all the little particles, all the organic matter, any insects or bugs that might be in the water, and pathogens that we're trying to filter out, they're all gone. We filter the water using a series of membranes.
So what we're looking at here is a membrane filtration module. So when I talk about the membranes filtering the water, this is what we're filtering the water with. And while you might think that the water flows through like the baleen of a whale, it's not true. These are hollow fiber membranes. So each of these little tiny strands are hollow, just like a shoelace. And the membrane is wrapped around the outside of these tiny little hollow fibers. So these sit in a bath of water, raw water, and then we pull the water through the wall of the straw or the shoelace, and then it travels along and it collects in this vessel at the end here. And this hole at the end is where we pull the water out. And the membranes are like an almost impermeable waterproof layer that we pull the water through. So now we're just left with clean, pure drinking water. Take care.
You are looking at Unit 400 from the City of Nanaimo Public Works Department. This truck is called our paint truck. It puts down most of the center line in the City of Nanaimo. Right now on the back, we have Holly. Today she is in charge of keeping the line straight. She can move the wheel back and forth right or left, which controls this paint gun. And then right behind the paint system, there's a glass beads that are dispensed onto the fresh wet paint for retroreflectivity at night. The painted lines can last 1 or 2 years. Most center lines in Nanaimo are painted every year. The white crosswalks and stop bars in thermoplastic can last anywhere from 2 to 7 years, depending on traffic flow. And on the back here, Derek will be kind enough to be dropping cones onto the fresh wet paint so vehicles do not drive over it. There's a lot of moving parts, high pressure, traffic, a lot of things going on at one time, and we're all working together. There's a lot of prep work before to make the lines straight. There's a lot of pulling of lines. Most of our equipment has guidelines and markers. It's a very rewarding job working for the Public Works Department. Lots of things go on and you stay in touch with the heartbeat of our city.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make replacements. And the roads today, we're doing our Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed, which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside borders. From here we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our 2-sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me we have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is pushing the transfer tape a little tighter to the vinyl. And then from there, we peel it back, our plastic, which basically leaves us with a big sticker. We put it on the aluminum. we're done here, we take our transfer tape off, and as you can see, we're left with Dundas.
We're here at Bruce and Dundas. Somebody's stolen the street names that were here, so we're here to replace them. Our sign shop has just generated us 2 signs, so I'm going to go through the process of putting it together and reinstalling the street names. First thing, we got to center the signs. We do everything on this truck. We've got all the equipment on here to build, install, remove, repair, whether it's street signs, street names, posts, banners, Christmas decorations, and so forth. I'm going to basically just put the sign in the brackets, and we'll be doing both signs, of course. So I've got a cross bracket that I'm going to put in, and then add the top sign, which is this street we're on, Dundas. Sorry, do the same there. We put the street that we're coming up to on the bottom, so they all basically have the same. The cross street will be on the top. We got to put some bolts in to secure them so nobody will steal the street name. We're ready to go. Just put this back and we'll go out and install this where the missing one is. Every year we do what we call a stop sign survey, where we go around and check all the stops. We clean them, make sure they're in the right spots, in good condition, not bent, and we also clean the street names, make sure they're good. As we're doing that, if there's ones that we decide we want to replace, we do that at that time. This year we're looking at approximately about 120 sets. It's very expensive
to do. Please, the next item is the school site acquisition charges. And I believe Mr. Lindsay is going to introduce this.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Mr. Holm has some prepared notes on introducing this item, which you have seen before and we have talked to you about at earlier meetings, but I'll just ask him to briefly introduce this report.
Mr. Holm, keeping in mind the hour.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will, and I'll try and keep it brief. As Council is aware from a previous report in July, Nanaimo Lady Smith Public Schools plans to implement a school site acquisition charge bylaw, and has now provided Council with a school board resolution indicating that their intention to institute a school site acquisition charge. The resolution identifies a land area required for expansion of school sites in the next 10 years, and totaling $10.5 million in value. And all of the sites identified are located within the city of Nanaimo. A school site acquisition charge is similar in ways to a development cost charge in the way it's administered. It draws from the same sections, some of the same sections of the Local Government Act. In that regard, the fees are collected through development, through either subdivision or building permit, and they help to ensure that development is supporting land acquisition for school expansions. So the school, Nanaimo Lady Smith Public Schools, has provided a resolution that, if you could pull up attachment B to the agenda there, under that report, outlines the proposed charges that will be collected through development. And in this case, the school, Nanaimo Lady Smith Public Schools, has also requested that Council consider a bylaw that would allow the collection of school site acquisition charges on 2 and 3 unit developments as well. Under the Local Government Act, the school district has the authority to collect on 4 units and greater. There's the school district resolution, the school board resolution, apologies. So under the Local Government Act, the school district has the authority to collect on 4 units and greater through their own bylaw. They require local government approval to collect on 2 and 3 unit developments. Approval of a bylaw to collect on 2 and 3 unit developments, as well as developments of 4 units and greater, and as well as single residential parcels created through subdivision, would align with the city's practice and process in place for collection of development cost charges. Should council direct staff to prepare the bylaw to allow school site acquisition charges to be collected on 2 and 3 residential units, developments as well. The request, as requested by the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, there would be an opportunity for community consultation or comment on the bylaw when it's introduced at council. So at this time, we're looking for, or the recommendation is to endorse the Nanaimo Ladysmith School Board's resolution, and as well direct staff to prepare a bylaw to collect school site acquisition charges on 2 and 3 unit developments. City staff have reviewed the information that was used to determine the proposed school site acquisition charges and are in agreement with the information provided and the methods used to determine the proposed rates. Should council, just mention that as staff have recommended council support the Nanaimo Ladysmith School Board's resolution, as well as seek direction to prepare the bylaw for 2 and 3 unit development school site acquisition charges. It should be noted that if council were to choose not to accept the resolution, there are provisions in the Local Government Act for a formal mediation process that would be triggered and that would assist the city and the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools in reaching an acceptable resolution. However, council cannot refuse to implement the school site acquisition charges altogether. Happy to take questions, but I know there is a representative of the school district here as well, and but happy to take questions after that.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. And Councillor Turley has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Holm. So in a situation like the previous presentation we were given, where the proponents were donating property to the school district for use as a school, would that amount be reduced from the amount of the acquisition charges they have to pay?
Through Your Worship, I can try and answer that, and I know the Mr. Walsh will be able to speak to that as well when he has an opportunity, but if required. There are provisions within the Local Government Act that allow the land to be donated that would then, I guess, offset or be reduced or eliminated from the charges if the land identified, I guess, is in a location that or is as necessary to meet the school district's expansion plans, the additional land acquisition that they require for school expansion in the area. But there are provisions in the Local Government Act to allow recognition of land to be provided and the school district to enter into an agreement to do that rather than collect the acquisition charges on a specific development.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And through you to staff, is us putting this Sandstone to second reading, which just in theory added 22 units of housing in the south end, and them giving up a 5-acre site, which is just about half of these 5.4 hectares that is in this document that is needed for schools. Has that been taken into consideration in this? Because it looks like they've already got half of what they wanted.
Through Your Worship, I think it'd be probably best to let Mr. Walsh speak to some of the details in regard to where the school district is looking at acquiring land and expanding schools. And this, obviously, this would only address the Sandstone Lands that Councillor Bonner is referencing. would only address the needs in that specific area. They don't address the needs in other parts of the community, which the school district has identified the need for school site expansions in other areas specifically that are accounted for in that the 5.4 hectares and the land value identified there at 10.5 million.
Are we done with questions and then we can invite Mr. Walsh down?
Oh, I thought we were just waiting for that. Sorry.
He's going to be a delegation. And let me just say politely, going too deeply into where the school board may wish to acquire property, I think would be a somewhat inappropriate line of questioning, given that property matters are some of the most confidential things that we all engage in, but in a general sort of way, not unreasonable. So that no further questions for staff right now. The patient, Mr. Mark Walsh, the Secretary Treasurer of School District 68. Good evening, Mr. Walsh, and welcome. You've heard the drill several times tonight.
Thank you, and good evening, Your Worship and Council. It's a very privilege to speak to you this evening. I think I had the opportunity to speak to Council electronically about a year ago or so about the district's long-range facilities plan. And one of the aspects of that plan is the school site acquisition charge. And so I know you've got a little bit of background already about it, and I very much want to express my appreciation to your staff, not just your planning staff, but all of the staff. In my experience in coming to Nanaimo and working with them is it is a top-notch partnership that serves our communities very well. So with respect to the school site acquisition charge, we are looking to be the 17th district in the province out of the 60 to institute one. We did have one up to about 2002 here in the area, and of course we had declining enrollment at that time. We anticipate that our neighbors to the south are likely to have a charge relatively quickly, and it's being talked about, I think, across the province. So what we did to come up with these, and again, I think you've got most of this information, is that we did rely, slightly different than many districts do, we relied on your information. And so we had a geospatial engineer, who I believe that the city has worked with, and we took the growth projections of the city and applied it and gave them where our students live, and then they were able to come up with a formula to say, okay, this type of dwelling creates this type of student. And then we're able to determine what growth is going to happen in the area approximately for the next decade and apply that formula to determine significant growth of, I think in the bylaw it's suggesting 1,600 units, which would include Nanaimo, Lanceville, and RDN, does not include Ladysmith or the CVRD. And so what the school site acquisition charge would do, of course, would be a development charge for each new door that's created, hopefully 2 and above rather than 4 and above. The reason the district is requesting council to apply it to 2 and above is because what we do find is that infill of the smaller infill is going to have create houses that are going to have the type of kids that are going to attend our public schools. And so felt like it would be appropriate in the circumstances. And also a couple of minor changes that we made, in fact, that came directly from staff. Questions about one was originally we were contemplating only trying to apply the charge in the context of the region to Lanceville, to Nanaimo, and to Area C. And we have expanded that to include Gabriola and Area A to treat the northern part of our school district as one region because everyone's impacting each other and it shouldn't be one municipality or area covering the cost of supporting others. You know, for instance, Gabriola is not growing according to our numbers, but even when they do get a little bit of growth, it impacts ND. And so we are going to, that's the concept. And so that's one minor change that you'll see. Another change that you will see is that we've lowered our number of hectares that we are anticipating needing over the next decade. And the reason for that is what we did was we looked around the district and we said, well, we need schools in the east, the northeast, the west, the south, but we actually don't need the full school site in each of those areas. And so what we did was we applied a kind of 5 new school sites concept, which is really more than I think that is reasonably required. And so what we've done is we've brought that number down a little bit. And you can see the areas in the bylaw are the areas that we were targeting. Pleasant Valley is going to be 100% over capacity in in the next decade. Chase River is going to be nearly 100% over capacity in the next decade. So it's fairly significant what we're seeing coming. So I think what they always say is the best time to get land is 10 years ago, and the second best time to get land is today. And I think that the district is a little bit behind in inserting this. And again, thank you for the consideration. Happy to answer any questions. And again, just want to express appreciation about this process on behalf of the district.
Thanks very much, Mr. Walsh. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and through to Mr. Walsh. Looking at the be it is resolved that as part of the letter here, you're mentioning that looking for a school in the Hammond Bay area and Pleasant Valley area. But today we just passed this, we sent this to the third reading in terms of the Sandstone, and there's looks like they're going to be giving you better part of 2.5 hectares in the south of Nanaimo, and this particular be it resolved suggests just making those schools larger. So I'm wondering, based on what we've just done tonight, are these figures right? Like I'm fine with passing the bylaw and getting the money you need. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just curious as these numbers now don't seem to line up.
Sure. Through your worship, what I think that our growth numbers are indicating, particularly for the south, is they wouldn't be incorporating, I don't know how long Sandstone would take, for instance, but the growth numbers without Sandstone mean that we are going to need expansion in Chase River. And so if ultimately that came to pass, we'd probably be reviewing our numbers to actually potentially say, okay, now it's time we need additional lands. One area particularly in the Sandstone that I think we've referenced in our letters to staff here are that we actually think that the Cedar portion of the development that they talked about, if that comes to pass, is actually one of those areas that we're probably going to need to look at school site. And so that would fundamentally change what we're doing. So at minimum, we know we need Pleasant Valley, particularly if Woodgrove does something, or if the Green Thumb does something. We know we need to do something in that Hammond Bay, Stevenson Point area if the growth continues like that. So it's the best guess based off of the development that our consultants have suggested, but I think it would actually be altered if Sandstone was to proceed, and probably our need would expand.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Council support the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public School Board resolution to institute a school site acquisition charge and direct staff to prepare a companion bylaw under Section 573(2) of the Local Government Act that would enable the collection of school site acquisition charges on any development of 2 and 3 residential units.
And I have a seconder in Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None? Mr. Walsh, successful evening for you. It was a long one.
It's been a privilege.
But given that the statute had sort of guaranteed you victory, we won't reward your costs. Thank you very much. The next is easement agreement to 141872 BC Ltd, bracket Marriott Hotel for parkade use -101 Gordon Street. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be very brief introducing this, and we're here this evening seeking council support in entering into a 20-year easement agreement for use of the parking by the new hotel that's under development at 100 Gordon Street. As I think council is well aware, the city went through a public RFP process and ultimately ended up in the sale or disposition of our property to PEG Developments, who are actively constructing a 172 unit hotel on the site, and we're on track for that to be open next year. As part of that RFP and a part of the sale agreement, was always understood that the parking would be secured within the existing city facility to support that development. And back in 2020, council did approve a license agreement to secure those parking stalls. The applicant in this case has asked that that agreement be transitioned from a licensed agreement to an actual easement agreement with a term that runs with the financing of the hotel. It assists them with their financer. So they've asking for a 20-year agreement on this easement for 30 parks, starting with 30 parking stalls. So staff are recommending that council proceed with that easement. The agreement does include, I think it's important to note, any changes that are done to the rates within the facility over that time would automatically apply to the agreement. So it doesn't freeze them in rates of today. They're subject to any future rate increases that the council decides to proceed with. So happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Council approve a 20-year easement agreement to 1141872 BC Limited for parkade use at 101 Gordon Street and direct the Mayor and Corporate Officer to execute the easement agreement to effect the transaction.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Hemmons, do you want to speak to it? No. Then Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Has there been any talk related to related security to those parking stalls? Will the hotel take any responsibility or share the cost of security, Mr. Lindsay?
Your Worship, I'd say that we haven't had any discussions in terms of cost share. The hotel is certainly aware of the steps the city's taken in terms of doing a review, a proposed review of the facilities and the security measures in the facilities themselves. We do know, for example, that other license holders that have spaces in the parkades now do, although not a formal agreement with the city, do have their own security officers that will patrol. So I would use, for example, the Coast Bastion. I know they from time to have their own private security, as did the casino. When they were renting leased spaces in our building. So there's no formal agreement there, but certainly I think there is the opportunity to collaborate.
All right, thank you. I'm going to support this, and it is revenue for the city. I note in your report that there is an option to expand from 30 to 60 stalls. And as you just mentioned, there's other operators that have spaces reserved for them, such as the Coast Bastion, the casino, Harbor Air, I believe, maybe others. So I guess my only comment would be that this puts a further strain on the number of parking stalls available to members of the general public who come downtown, which of course we want them to do. And we know that, like it or not, most of them get here by car. And that's not going to change in the short or medium term. So I express that concern as a general one about the amount of downtown parking that's available. But having noted that, I will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. The rental is for 30 units regardless of whether they're using them or not? Yeah.
That is correct, Your Worship.
And I don't see any sunset clause in this thing. Is that, you know, I would hate to have this happen, but just say the hotel decided to stop doing business. Are they tying up these parking stalls for the next X amount of years, or would that just do we just do another council meeting and get rid of it?
I think, Your Worship, I think the answer is in your question there. Yes, I think depending on the nature of the request, if the operator discontinued or the business transformed that they would no longer require the use of the stalls, they would ask for the easement to be discharged, and we'd be back in front of council for that decision.
Okay, thank you.
No further speakers. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is item E, rezoning application number RA 467-440 Kennedy Street. Mr.
Holm is going to introduce this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is an application to rezone property at 440 Kennedy Street. Applicants Barbara and Robert Humphreysville for a site-specific zoning, an amendment to the R13 zone. And if you could bring up, there you go. Thank you. Attachment A on the overhead shows the property, which is in the old city neighborhood and is designated neighborhood within the official community plan. The property is zoned R13 Old City Duplex Residential. Currently consists of a parcel that is 217 square meters and another that is 872 square meters. So one very small parcel and one reasonably large parcel that's actually larger than the minimum parcel size, one significantly smaller. The minimum parcel size in the zone is 750 square meters. The applicant's proposing a site-specific rezoning to reduce the minimum parcel size required to 500 square meters, which would allow these two parcels to be more evenly distributed, to create parcels of slightly larger than 500 meters to accommodate proposed development on the lots. If you could bring up attachment D, please, it'll give you an idea of what's proposed there. This is a concept plan. It shows two relatively even lots developed under the R13 zone. The intent of the rezoning is to allow the lot line adjustment between the two parcels by adjusting the site-specific minimum parcel size to 500 square meters. The proposal includes a community amenity contribution of $2,000 towards local parks and trail improvements. If council were to pass third reading of the bylaw, staff recommend additional items be supported prior to final adoption, including road dedication from the lane and a building orientation covenant. The proposal is consistent with the official community plan and the Old City Neighborhood plan, concept plan, and as well is supported by the policies of the Transportation Master Plan. I'm happy to take any questions, and that's all I have to say on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. Appears to correct some historical little mess with ridiculously small lot and another lot. I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor Hemmons, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.194 to permit a site-specific rezoning at 440 Kennedy Street in order to reduce the minimum lot size requirement in the R13 zone from 750 meters square to 500 meters square to facilitate a proposed boundary adjustment subdivision pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.194 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I would move that council direct staff to secure a road dedication, community amenity contribution, and a building orientation covenant should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Ms. Gurry, council resolutions update.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report starting on page 112 of your original agenda has the council resolutions update report for information, along with the attachments of the resolutions that council has passed in the last quarter, the last 3 months of this term. And the last spreadsheet attached to the report is an update of the report I brought to you last time in July, with all of the updates completed, shaded in gray. So the staff is here to answer any questions you might have as to the status of the resolutions. The first attachment shows you the completed resolutions in that quarter. The second attachment B shows you the resolutions that are in progress. And the final attachment C is the update from the last time this report was brought forward to you, with those resolutions that are now complete, shaded in gray. So regular business is not included in these spreadsheets, such as bylaws or rezoning readings, etc. However, there was some notices of motion that were left in here that normally in the past, when I was preparing this report, I would remove. So you would see, for example, in attachment A, the completed, it says a couple of notices of motions are complete. That's just forwarding the notice of motion to the next meeting to be dealt with that was assigned to me as the clerk. I completed my task. Who it was assigned to the actual work, say Mr. Lindsay, he's not done his work yet. So I just wanted to point out that if you say that's not complete, the notice of motion part is complete. My work is done. So any questions you may have, I can answer, or staff is here to answer.
Well, 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 the milk of human kindness. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Just two little questions. It's on the attachment B, and it's the two that are referred to as a community program development grant and the proposed amendments to the business license bylaw. And so one is a grant that we said in July, and it says it's still in progress. Is that done, or did they get the money?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bonner, attachment B, where it says Community Program Development Grant, Nanaimo Climate Action Hub Society, and it says it's still in progress.
Yeah.
That could be complete. It is assigned to Mr. Harding. I could follow up with you on that, or perhaps, I think Ms. Mercer has left for this evening, but I could definitely follow up and give you an answer as to why that's still noted as in progress. That could be an error.
And the other one is the one below it, and I thought we passed the bylaw just a couple of weeks ago, changing the liquor license to 165.
And I believe you're correct with that too. So this report might have been started or the report run before that was completed. And it should be marked complete.
So the report's in progress too.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. All right, thank you, Ms. Gurry. Much appreciated. The next are bylaws. Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 4500.160. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I would move that Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 4500.160 to rezone 115 Chapel Street to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the core DT1 zone be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Political Signage Regulation Bylaw 2021, number 7335. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I would move that Political Signage Regulation Bylaw 2021, number 7335, to govern the use of political signs within the city of Nanaimo be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Traffic and Highways Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 5000.047. Sorry.
Thank you. I would move that Traffic and Highways Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 5000.047, to remove references to election signage be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is Sign Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 2850.23.
Thank you. I would move that Sign Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 2850.23, to remove references to political or campaign signs be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And finally, Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 7159.14.
Thank you. I would move that Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 7159.14, to assign fines associated with political sign violations be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We do not have any notices of motion tonight, Ms. Gurry. Question period. Well, Mr. Barclay, you get the bigger patience award than Mr. Walsh. 13C.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. My question pertains to Council's, what I thought was an easy acceptance of the school site requisition charge. I would note from the discussion paper that Claire Negrin provided, it says here that the costs, and this is what troubles me, it has to do with affordability of housing, whether purchasing or renting. And she mentions in the consultation that developers noted that the costs are then passed on to home buyers. So again, I wonder how this fits in. And I think of the school district. Now, I don't know how it works between Victoria and the Nanaimo School District, but there are schools and lands, I count at least 6 that are empty or underutilized, whether that's Dufferin Crescent, Extension School, Woodlands, Mount Benson, Harewood School, Rutherford School. There is land here, and I don't know why the school board wants to get money to buy more land. I don't understand that part. But so my question to council is, how does adding $600 to $1,000 per unit enhance housing affordability, whether for home buyers or home renters?
I think that's a very good question. Let me offer a preliminary answer, and staff may be able to assist here. It will definitely impact the cost of the housing. On the other hand, school taxes will go up if they have to acquire land in the normal course of events, which they will. And candidly, my reading of the material and my understanding of the law is we really don't have any choice.
Well, it does note that there can be mediation, and certainly what's happening with the Sandstone Lands, there's, again, as Councillor Turley noted, there's another variable. Anyhow.
Your point is taken, but Mr. Lindsay's...
Your Worship, I think the heart of the question of how the rates were calculated and which lands the school board factored in their determination, I think it's probably a question best directed at the school board themselves, more so than council. Absolutely, we recognize that all of these costs, whether they're DCCs or works and services or school charges or application fees, are all layered costs on top of development. I would note that they're increasing, but I would also note that these are resulting in services that are required by development. So as we need more development, they put on demand on for us for more servicing, but for the school board for more schools and more sites. So it's trying to provide a fair way of distributing that cost and having new units, new residents contribute towards that. Not pay for it entirely, but contribute towards those costs.
Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Barclay. Thank you. Motion for adjournment from Councillor Martman. Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.